Chapter 2639, Arrival of Heavenly Tribulation. Fu Yunhai's expression changed drastically as he exclaimed, "Not good. He's about to advance. How is that possible? We've put him under so much pressure, yet he still has the spare energy to advance?" Yingxiong's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. "What should we do?" Rong Wenlin asked as he sucked in a sharp breath. Ling Han was already so ferocious at this moment, so once he advanced to the sixth heaven, his battle prowess would naturally soar to a new height. Gu Hei hadn't imagined that Ling Han would be so courageous either. While being attacked by 6 elites, he unexpectedly decided to set aside some energy to advance. This was truly a gamble with his life on the line. Regardless of if he made a mistake while advancing, causing him to lose his mind, or he were struck by them, both would cause him to be severely wounded. However, Ling Han had still decided to advance anyway. Moreover, he had succeeded. However, Gu Hei immediately regained his composure, saying, "It doesn't matter. Even if he advances to the sixth heaven, his battle prowess will only double at most. We're still powerful enough to suppress him." After breaking through, the cultivation of celestial kings would become unstable for a period of time. Thus, even though their battle prowess would increase significantly, it would only be doubled their original battle prowess at most. What was the greatest significance of advancing? It was in order to unlock the path for further cultivation, allowing one to further raise their strength. Otherwise, one would be trapped in the same spot. Yingxiong and the others pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. Their battle prowess was more than double that of Ling Han, so even if he advanced to the sixth heaven, they would still be able to maintain their advantage as long as his battle prowess didn't reach the ninth heaven. Thunderclouds rumbled overhead. It was clear that Ling Han's sixth heaven heavenly tribulation was far more powerful than that of the Empress, and this was because he had mastered a fearsome body art as well. Moreover, this body art was above the regulations. Crack! A bolt of lightning smashed down, carrying with it a magnificent power of destruction. Gu Hei and the others hurriedly retreated. No matter how powerful they were, they still didn't dare to challenge the heavens head-on. Even Gu Hei could only retreat at this moment. He dared to face the Empress tribulation, but he didn't dare to face Ling Han's. After all, that would be seeking death. On the ground, everyone was wide-eyed with astonishment. They hadn't expected such a huge turn in the situation. Ling Han was already on the verge of collapsing, yet he suddenly summoned a tribulation, attempting to advance to the sixth heaven. If he succeeded, his battle prowess would definitely enjoy a huge boost, perhaps allowing him to turn the tables and achieve victory. "Impossible," someone said with a resolute shake of their head. After one advances, their cultivation will definitely become unstable. Thus, his battle prowess can only double at most. That's nowhere near enough to suppress Gu Hei and the other elites. Moreover, this heavenly tribulation is absolutely terrifying. Even if he manages to overcome it, he'll definitely have to pay a huge price. At that time, he'll have to face 6 powerful elites with severe wounds. How can he achieve victory? If you ask me, I'd say that his chance of victory will decrease after he advances. Pay. Outsiders who come here to train all deserve to die. These were the people who didn't think that Ling Han would win. However, there were also those who thought the contrary. Freaks like him can't be measured according to general rules. Others might only experience double the battle prowess after advancing, but perhaps he's an exception. Moreover, who knows if he possesses some rare treasure? Only time will tell. While they were engaged in spirited discussions, heavenly tribulation had already marched over with fearsome power. The might of this heavenly tribulation was infinitesimally close to the ninth heaven, but it still hadn't crossed this threshold yet. Just as Gu Hei had predicted, even though Ling Han had advanced, his battle prowess had only doubled, and it was still unable to reach the barrier to the ninth heaven. Upon seeing this, Yingxiong, Fu Yunhai, and the others all felt reassured. They became eager with anticipation. Once Ling Han overcame his heavenly tribulation, they would immediately charge forward to attack him. Ling Han's situation was extremely dire. He was already severely wounded because of the 6 elites, and he was almost on the verge of collapsing. Now, the might of this heavenly tribulation was no weaker than the attacks of the 6 elites. Combined with his injuries, it was inevitable that he faced the risk of death. No one could defeat heavenly tribulation. One could only endure it until it concluded. If they didn't die, that could be marked down as a victory. Crack. 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 Apocalyptic bolts of lightning blasted down with no reprieve. At this level, Ling Han was already unable to use these bolts of lightning to temper his body. After all, these bolts of lightning were approaching the 9th heaven. Any slip-up, and he would be killed. Ling Han wielded his divine demon sword as he battled against heavenly tribulation. 2 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours. His wounds became increasingly severe, and indestructible true fluid was already spread all over his body. However, he had already exhausted all of it during the battle just then, so he was truly at the end of his rope. His body was riddled with wounds, and even his bones could clearly be seen. Even though heavenly tribulation was about to conclude, the 6 elites had already recovered to their peak condition, with each preparing their most powerful strikes. They were going to unleash quick and brutal attacks on Ling Han, killing him in a single exchange. The direr his situation, the more composed Ling Han became. He was burning with fighting spirit, with his eyes blazing and astonishingly bright. Right now, he could battle against heavenly tribulation with a relaxed mind. This was because no one would dare to attack him at this moment. Otherwise, they would be seeking death. If he further magnified this heavenly tribulation with his cultivation, only heavenly venerates would be able to rival it. 16 hours, 20 hours, 24 hours. As if preparing for an ultimate strike, the final bolt of lightning still refused to erupt. Finally, a golden fist slammed down from the clouds, with countless arcs of lightning enveloping it. It was as if heaven and earth had thrown a punch. Everyone paled in shock upon seeing this. Even their breathing became difficult, and some of them involuntarily collapsed to the ground. This was the true might of heaven and earth. They couldn't accept this. Hadn't they all become celestial kings already? Didn't they already enjoy an equivalent status with the regulations? Yet, they were actually cowering to the might of heaven and earth? If a heavenly venerate were present, they would definitely scoff at these people. Regulations were merely a set of rules created by heaven and earth. If heaven and earth were dissatisfied, they could easily scrap the regulations and replace them with something else. Once this occurred, what would celestial kings be worth? Thus, celestial kings could only enjoy an equivalent status with the regulations. Heaven and earth, however? TSK, even heavenly venerates didn't enjoy such a right. At the very least, low-level heavenly venerates didn't. Ling Han roared as he charged forward, becoming one with his sword as he soared toward the large hand. Pung! However, it was a shame that even though the divine demon sword had always been indestructible, it finally met its match at this moment. It was completely unable to shatter the iron fist, and it was instead slammed down along with its owner, crashing heavily to the ground. Crackle. Arcs of chaotic lightning flashed about, unleashing a devastating, destructive might. All regulations were obliterated, with only these arcs of lightning remaining. Everyone was speechless with shock. This was the genuine might of heaven and earth. Against such overwhelming heavenly tribulation, could Ling Han truly survive? He's dead. He's definitely dead. Even 9th heaven celestial kings would be severely wounded by that final strike, to say nothing of a newly advanced 6th heaven celestial king. It doesn't matter even if he hasn't died. He's definitely suffered severe wounds, yet there are still 6 elites waiting to attack him. By the looks of it, his fate is sealed. While they were chattering, the golden fist slowly dissipated. However, the boundless arcs of lighting enveloping the fist continued to crackle as if they wanted to reduce Ling Han to dust before they vanished. Only after 15 minutes did the fist finally disappear. The dark clouds immediately receded, instantly signaling the end of the tribulation. It was as if it had never existed in the first place. Everyone craned their neck to see if Ling Han was still alive, or if he had already been reduced to nothingness. "He's over there," someone suddenly exclaimed, pointing in a certain direction. Amid an expanse of ruins, they could see Ling Han slowly walking out. Even while being struck by that fearsome fist of lightning just then, he had still remained standing upright. Now that the fist had disappeared, he naturally walked over straight away. Waff! However, Ling Han immediately started to vomit blood. Surprisingly, though, this blood was actually golden in color. In fact, one could even see pulsating symbols within this blood. Chapter 2640, Spent Force? This is our opportunity. He's severely wounded, and he's even vomiting his blood essence. Gu Hei said with loud laughter. With a roar, he immediately charged forward. Niu Tsangyu and the others hurriedly attacked as well. They had to kill Ling Han. Otherwise, since they had already offended Ling Han so deeply, he would definitely seek revenge in the future if he were afforded time to recover. At that time, they naturally couldn't stop this freak. Just as Gu Hei had said, Ling Han's wounds were truly far too severe. During the final strike of the tribulation, Ling Han had channeled the indestructible heaven scroll. However, he had already exhausted his energy before that, and the punch had also lingered for far too long. Thus, Ling Han had been left with no option but to combust his blood essence to channel the indestructible heaven scroll. Even so, his physique had still been blasted apart by heavenly tribulation, causing him to vomit blood. Moreover, it was because he had been channeling the indestructible heaven scroll that there were still symbols of the technique pulsating within his blood essence. Right now, he was in an incredibly feeble state. In fact, even an ordinary sixth heaven celestial king might be able to kill him. Yet, he was facing the attacks of 6 powerful elites. What could he do? Boom! The attacks arrived. Pang, pang, pang. Bursts of energy erupted, instantly evaporating the entire lake. In fact, the entire region beneath them was flattened, creating a sea-sized crater. Many sixth heaven celestial kings were unable to dodge in time, and they were all obliterated into smithereens by the devastating shock waves. Many more were also wounded. The combined attack of the 6 elites was absolutely petrifying. Ling Han was most likely dead. The 6 elites paid absolutely no heed to others as they scoured the surroundings for Ling Han's corpse. However, they found no such thing. It can't be. Our attack was definitely too powerful for that brat to block. However, with the might of his physique, there should at least be a corpse. Perhaps heavenly tribulation was too powerful? And it already damaged his physique? That would be a shame. The 6 elites all wore a deep frown. If Ling Han had been turned into dust, then they would have wasted all these years of hard work and patience. They would have gone to all these lengths for nothing. Thus, they were naturally unwilling to accept this. This was especially the case for Gu Hei. He was still hoping for the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit to advance to the 8th heaven, thereby allowing him to rival 9th heaven celestial kings. However, his plan had fallen apart, so he was naturally feeling extremely stifled, as if he couldn't find an avenue to unleash his rage. I feel like we've overlooked something. Are you guys looking for me? Ling Han's voice traveled over. Whoosh! With a flash, he had already appeared before them. He was still riddled with wounds, and he was still drenched in blood, his bones exposed. However, his wounds hadn't become more severe. Gu Hei finally connected the dots, exclaiming, "You hid in a spatial celestial tool just then." The reality was extremely simple. The 6 elites had unleashed a fatal strike, yet Ling Han had simply entered his celestial guest residence, leaving it to the spatial celestial tool to face that attack. After all, this was a celestial tool. Something at the 9th heaven. In this world, only those with a battle prowess at or above the 9th heaven could damage celestial tools. Even so, they would still be unable to damage the divine metal itself. That being the case, How could those with a battle prowess at the 8th heaven possibly damage a celestial tool? Ling Han grinned in reply. Combined with his blood-drenched appearance, this smile appeared as harrowing as could be. It's my turn now, he asked. Gu Hei forcefully calmed himself down, snorted, and said, so what if you escaped death once? In your current state, how can you possibly be our match? To say nothing of the 6 of us, even a single one of us can easily suppress you at this moment. Ling Han's condition was far too poor. Thus, what did it matter that he had advanced to the 6th heaven? Instead of rising, his battle prowess had instead fallen. Is that so? Ling Han said with a loud laugh. Boom! Like a raging tsunami, his aura started to explode. How is this possible? The 6 elites exclaimed in shock. How was Ling Han's strength still increasing? And at such a rapid speed? This was impossible. Stabilizing one's cultivation required a great deal of effort, with even 100 years being a short time. This was especially the case at such a high level. It wouldn't be impossible that some might still remain in the process of stabilization even after 10 billion years. Yet, Ling Han had stabilized his cultivation immediately after breaking through? And his battle prowess was increasing several folds over? How was this possible? Gu Hei stared at the rolled-up scroll in Ling Han's left hand. His instinct told him that this was the source of Ling Han's exploding power. After staring at it for a moment, his expression suddenly changed, and he exclaimed in deep astonishment. Dimension Scroll. He was a prodigy from the world's paramount martial academy, and he was even the most powerful disciple enrolled in the past 10 billion years. Thus, it was no surprise that he recognized the Dimension Scroll. What Dimension Scroll? Nyotsangyu and the others asked. Gu Hei initially didn't want to explain. After all, he viewed these 5 people with contempt. Their cultivation was but a shell, with their battle prowess being as weak as could be. However, since he might need to use these 5 people, he replied, after opening a dimension scroll, one can obtain the power of heaven and earth and immediately become a heavenly venerate. Pooh! Nyotsangyu and the others immediately spluttered in shock. They were wide-eyed and gaping, and it was as if they had become stupid. They were indeed transfixed with shock. In comparison, what was the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit worth? After obtaining it, they would only have a sliver of a chance to advance to the 9th heaven. The Dimension Scroll, however? It could directly allow one to become a heavenly venerate. Heavenly venerate. Even to 9th heaven celestial kings, this was still a lofty and unreachable proposition. How is this possible? Such a divine matter actually exists in the world? Jiao Yu exclaimed in a trembling voice. Nyotsangyu and the others also expressed disbelief. Would this not overturn all the iron rules of cultivation? There was absolutely no need to challenge oneself and exert effort. After all, a single scroll could allow one to become a heavenly venerate. Gu Hei had no option but to say, it's not as ideal and simple as you think. The Dimension Scroll can only be opened by those chosen by heaven and earth. However, this is power bestowed by heaven and earth, so heaven and earth can naturally confiscate this power as well. Moreover, those who become heavenly venerates in this manner can only become a first-tier heavenly venerate at most. So that's how it is. Nyotsangyu and the others finally understood the implications. However, the gleam in their eyes became increasingly bright. They finally understood why Ling Han hadn't activated this divine treasure. This was because he wasn't the person chosen by heaven and earth. However, perhaps they were. Even though such heavenly venerates would be controlled by heaven and earth, and even though it would be impossible to advance to the 2nd tier, was becoming a heavenly venerate not impressive enough already? What else could they wish for? Kill him. Without Gu Hei needing to tell them, they immediately charged forward with red in their eyes. For the sake of obtaining the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit, they would be willing to fight with all their might. However, they definitely wouldn't risk their lives. After all, as long as they had enough ascending dragon pills and time, they could eventually advance to the 9th heaven. However, becoming a heavenly venerate was different. This was valuable enough for them to gamble their lives. Upon seeing this, a cold smile involuntarily appeared on Gu Hei's face. He had withheld a vital piece of information. If one of them were the person chosen by heaven and earth, the Dimension Scroll would automatically react to them. Right now, however, the Dimension Scroll remained in a state of slumber, signifying that none of them was the chosen person. Gu Hei didn't care much about this. This was because he desired much more than just becoming a first-tier heavenly venerate, much less a heavenly venerate controlled by heavenly venerate. Did people not cultivate to achieve transcendence? He naturally wouldn't reveal this information. Instead, he would let these people bet their lives. In any case, he felt like Ling Han was in an eerie state at this moment. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Niu Tsangyu and the others dashed forward, attacking Ling Han as they did so. Ling Han stepped around to dodge. His wounds were far too severe at this moment, and he was already out of power to channel the regulations. Thus, he was purely relying on the power of his physical body to move. Attack harder. He's already a spent force. Niu Tsangyu and the others shouted. Chapter 2641, The Counterattack Begins. Niu Tsangyu and the others all fought to unleash powerful attacks. None of them urged Gu Hei to help them. They naturally all had their own plans. As long as they killed Ling Han and immediately snatched the Dimension Scroll, if they obtained the blessing of heaven and earth, they could immediately become a heavenly venerate. At that time, how could this prison trap them? As such, it was good that Gu Hei wasn't attacking. This meant that there was one less competitor, the most powerful one at that. Moreover, Ling Han was already a spent force, so the 5 of them were more than powerful enough to kill him. Ling Han held the Dimension Scroll with his left hand, continuing to extract its power. Meanwhile, he held the Divine Demon's sword with his right hand, slashing and hacking and creating space for himself. How is he still not dead? After battling for a while, Niu Tsangyu and the others found it strange that Ling Han was still alive. In his state, he should have fallen over and died at any moment, so how was he still resisting with such toughness? Gu Hei finally charged forward. After observing the battle for so long, he believed that he had noticed some weaknesses. I don't know how he's doing it, but he's able to wield some of the power of the Dimension Scroll. It's because of this that he can still resist. Don't hold back. Once we knock the Dimension Scroll out of his hands, he'll become nothing but lamb for slaughter. After hearing this hint and encouragement, Niu Tsangyu and the others immediately rediscovered their confidence. They continued to attack. The 6 elites unleashed their furious and relentless attacks, completely suppressing Ling Han. They were clearly enjoying an absolute advantage, yet they were unable to turn this advantage into victory no matter what they did. In their eyes, Ling Han was far too stubborn. No matter how they attacked him, once their attacks weakened a little, Ling Han would immediately recover to his original state. They couldn't kill him no matter what. Brat, why let yourself suffer so much? They started to play a mental game. You can't escape death, so why don't you choose a swifter and less painful death? Your wounds are too severe, it's impossible for you to turn the tables. However, Ling Han remained unfazed. His eyes remained looking down, not allowing the 6 people to see the killing intent hidden within them. You're too stubborn. Even if this takes 100 years, we're still going to kill this brat. With the enticement of the Dimension Scroll, Niu Tsangyu and the others naturally couldn't give up halfway. After all, the Dimension Scroll was already valuable enough for them to risk their lives, and they were more so affected by the black energy at this moment. Thus, they were naturally even more crazed and frenzied than normal. The battle continued, and they all unleashed their most powerful attacks at Ling Han. Time slowly crept by. Just like they had predicted, 1 year quickly passed by. Then another year, 10 years, 30 years. Not only had they battled for 100 years, but the battle still continued. To 8th Heaven celestial kings, battling for tens of thousands of years was nothing too surprising. However, the stubbornness of their opponent and his refusal to accept death was still enough to make them feel a sense of exasperation and apprehension. This young man was truly far too terrifying. If he were truly allowed to stabilize his cultivation, who at the eighth heaven could hope to wound him? However, the more this was the case, the more desperate they were to kill Ling Han. If they didn't remove this nail from their eyes, they wouldn't be able to feel at ease. Moreover, there was still the attraction of the Dimension Scroll. 100 years, 150 years, 170 years. Ling Han suddenly stopped, not dodging anymore. Haha. Have you finally accepted your fate? Fu Yunhai said with loud laughter. He lunged forward, throwing a fist at Ling Han's forehead. Meanwhile, his left hand clawed at the Dimension Scroll. He was going to kill Ling Han and snatch the Dimension Scroll in a single breath. Once he obtained the Dimension Scroll, he could immediately become a heavenly venerate. At that time, he could dominate the entire Celestial King graveyard without a worry in his mind. Of course, he didn't for a second consider that he might not be the person chosen by heaven and earth. He refused to accept this possibility. Fu Yunhai's punch arrived, and a smile stretched across his face. Success was imminent. Niu Tsangyu and the others had initially thought that this was a trap by Ling Han. However, upon seeing him remain still even as the fist arrived, they involuntarily started to regret their decision to hold back. By the looks of it, Ling Han had truly given up. They hurriedly lunged forward. Even if they were slower, they still had to fight for the Dimension Scroll. Pang! Ling Han suddenly unleashed a fearsome punch. In this instant, he didn't control his power anymore. Boom! Like a crashing tsunami, an overwhelming power surged forth with vigor and violence. His attack had come later, yet it arrived first. This was the specialty of body art's explosive power. Fu Yunhai wore an expression of deep shock and disbelief as the fist smashed into his face. Pooh! The fist sunk deep into his head before exiting through the back. Shield of origin power? It was as futile as a sheet of paper. Fu Yunhai was unable to even put up a struggle as his mind was immediately obliterated, dying in an instant. His limbs became limp as he hung on Ling Han's fist. Fuck. 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 Niu Tsangyu and the others became pale with terror. How would they still dare to attack? They desperately tried to stop in their tracks. However, they had all been charging forward to fight for the Dimension Scroll just then, and they had all been doing so with all their strength. Thus, how could they halt this momentum? This was a hilarious sight. The four elites were charging toward Ling Han, yet they all wore expressions of absolute terror, with their hands and feet furiously flailing in an attempt to stop themselves. However, no one could laugh out loud. This was because they had witnessed the grisly sight of Fu Yunhai's head being obliterated. This had stunned them into silence, and they still had yet to regain their composure. Pang, 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 pang. Ling Han unleashed 4 punches in a row, sending Niu Tsangyu and the others flying. Fortunately, they were defending with all their might, so they weren't easily killed like Fu Yunhai. They only vomited blood, and they weren't smashed into smithereens. Gu He also ground to a halt, his face filled with astonishment. He was unable to accept the reality of Ling Han suddenly becoming so fearsome. You endured this entire time just to unleash your power at this moment? He asked in a solemn voice. Ling Han replied with a faint smile. This person was smarter than the others, correctly guessing his intentions. When extracting power from the Dimension Scroll, he could actually unleash this power in an instant. However, if he did so, the 6 people would definitely flee upon noticing the changing situation. In that case, he would only be able to kill 1 or 2 of them at most. He wouldn't be able to kill all of them. Thus, he decided to endure, not unleashing the power that he had obtained. Only at this moment did he finally unleash it. You did this because you want to kill all of us. Gu Hei exclaimed, his voice quivering slightly. He could only think of a single possibility. Ling Han applauded, saying, correct. With a flick of his hands, Fu Yunhai's corpse was instantly tossed into the distance. Pung! He collapsed to the ground like a heap of trash. Gu Hai sucked in a sharp breath. Jiao Yu started to wipe his cold sweat. Niu Zhangyu felt his knees shaking, and Xue Qingbai felt his heart contracting. The person before them was far too terrifying. In order to kill them all, he had actually chosen to endure so much. Had he not been afraid of slipping up and being killed? However, he had indeed endured until this moment. Now, it was their turn to be hunted. Flee! Their eyes flickered, yet none of them moved. This was because the first person to flee would definitely be the first person to be targeted by Ling Han. That would only result in death, and it would create an opportunity for the others to escape. Ling Han smiled faintly. He held up the dimension scroll and waved it around, saying, "You guys want it?" Niu Zhangyu, Rong Wenlin, and Xue Qingbai immediately shook their heads. However, Jiao Yu was unwilling to be toyed around with by Ling Han, or perhaps he had more of a backbone than the others, and he said, "So what if I want it? Are you willing to give it to me?" "Sure." With a flick of his hands, Ling Han genuinely tossed the dimension scroll toward Jiao Yu. Dimension scroll instinctively caught it. Only when he gripped the dimension scroll firmly did he finally come to his senses. Delight swept over him, and he was so overjoyed that he couldn't even speak. This. How could such a wonderful thing occur? Had Ling Han's brain been damaged? Chapter 2642, Merciless Toying. Upon seeing this, Niu Zhangyu and the others wanted to grab a hammer to bash themselves to death. Why hadn't they nodded? Even Gu He found this incredibly strange. What was Ling Han playing at? However, he immediately came to a realization. None of them could open the scroll anyway, so Ling Han was simply pretending to be generous. In reality, he was actually toying with them. Jiao Yu faltered for a moment before hurriedly using his other hand to open the scroll. Once he succeeded, he could immediately soar into the heavens and become the most powerful person in the Celestial King graveyard. In fact, even after he left this place, he could still act wantonly thanks to this newfound strength. Heavenly venerates were transcendent above regulations. However, it was too late for Niu Zhangyu and the others to feel regret now. Their reaction was too slow, so they could only look on in helplessness. Jiao Yu's hands were trembling slightly. The dimension scroll was almost weightless, yet he felt as if it were as heavy as a mountain. His heart was about to leap out from his throat. He was beside himself with excitement, and with a flick of his finger, the dimension scroll, actually, opened. It opened. Everyone was stunned upon seeing this. Were they about to witness a miracle? Were they going to witness the birth of a heavenly venerate, someone who would dominate the world from here on? Fuck. Why hadn't this fortune fallen to them? Not only Niu Zhangyu and his companions, but even the celestial kings below had extremely complicated feelings. They felt an urge to roar at Ling Han, asking him why he didn't give the dimension scroll to them. Even Gu He couldn't understand this at all. In his mind, Ling Han wasn't this type of person. Even if Ling Han couldn't open the dimension scroll, he still wouldn't give it to others for nothing, right? Moreover, how did Jiao Yu manage to open the dimension scroll? This didn't make sense. Ha ha ha. Mere mortals, bow before me. After opening the dimension scroll, Jiao Yu spread his arms and closed his eyes, an expression of intoxication on his face. After opening the dimension scroll, he could obtain the blessing of heaven and earth, something that could transform even mere mortals into heavenly venerates. Because this was the power of heaven and earth, the power of a realm, it could naturally transform anyone it wanted into a heavenly venerate. Jiao Yu was far too smug at this moment. As he swept his gaze around, his eyes were filled with disdain and scorn as if everyone was beneath him. He was already on a different level from these people. These people were nothing but mere ants. Jiao Yu's eyes were cold as he peered at Ling Han from the corners of his eyes, and he said, "Taking into account your contribution, I can spare you from death. Kneel down and submit to me." This was clearly a weakling being intoxicated by success. Ling Han scoffed, saying, "Are you stupid?" "Impudence," Jiao Yu said with a cold sneer. He raised his hand and swatted at Ling Han. Before a mighty heavenly venerate, this measly person still dared to act with such disrespect? Such foolishness and insolence. Ling Han shook his head as he replied with a punch. Pung! Jiao Yu was instantly sent flying, crashing into a mountain peak several hundred kilometers away. Under the huge force, the mountain peak was immediately shattered and broken. However, Jiao Yu was also stopped in his tracks. How is this possible? Jiao Yu shouted as he shakily hovered in the sky. He had already become a heavenly venerate, yet he was still unable to block Ling Han's punch. Yingxiong Yu and the others couldn't help but shake their heads. They could see everything clearly. Jiao Yu was still the same Jiao Yu as always. Had his strength gone up by a single iota? That dimension scroll or whatnot was an absolute fake. However, Gu Hei didn't think this. Shock spread across his face as he said, "I understand. I know why your body art is so powerful now. It's because you absorbed the power of the dimension scroll." What? Everyone was stunned. Hadn't Ling Han told them himself that only those chosen by heaven and earth could open the dimension scroll? If it were others, even if they were ninth heaven celestial kings, they would still be unable to open the dimension scroll. Otherwise, wouldn't the power of heaven and earth be worthless? Yet, Ling Han could extract power from the dimension scroll? Was this not inconceivable? However, this speculation was extremely logical. Ling Han's body art had indeed overcome some barrier. Ling Han nodded, saying, "I have to say, you are quite an intelligent person. You've already extracted all of the power from this dimension scroll?" Gu Hei asked. "Otherwise, you wouldn't have tossed it to someone else." "Correct," Ling Han said, not disputing this speculation. Otherwise, even if he wanted to toy with Gu Hei and the others, he wouldn't have risked the dimension scroll. After all, what if one of them was truly the chosen one? Jiao Yu naturally heard this as well, and his face involuntarily became beet red. As a mighty eighth heaven celestial king, he had actually been fooled like a monkey? He shook in fury. He had been so excited just then. He had been so smug. It was as if he had obtained a peerless treasure. In the end, however, he had actually been fooled. He was like a clown, giving the performance of his life before everyone. He had lost all face. He felt frustration, and he felt rage. He wanted to kill someone. However, Jiao Yu's next action took everyone by surprise. Turning around, he immediately fled into the distance. Weighing fury against life, what was the former worth? Ling Han was far too powerful at this moment, and Jiao Yu couldn't rival him at all. Thus, would he charge over to seek death? The higher level a celestial king, the less they were affected by the black energy. They would indeed have increased bloodlust, yet they wouldn't seek death for no reason. "You still want to flee?" Ling Han said with a shake of his head. Whoosh! Drawing on his terrifying strength, he immediately shot forward and caught up to Jiao Yu. He then threw a punch. With Ling Han's current explosive power, unless his opponent was skilled in the regulations of space, they would be unable to escape from his grasp. Pooh! With a single punch, Ling Han's fist instantly exited through the front of Jiao Yu's chest. Jiao Yu slowly looked down. He wanted to speak, yet his head immediately flopped to the side, signaling his death. 2 eighth heaven celestial kings. Yet, they were easily killed by Ling Han just like that. Everyone was stunned. They all became numb. Meanwhile, Yingxiong Yu and the others all felt a cold chill run down their spines. An unspeakable feeling of bitterness and anguish washed over them. They exchanged a glance before fleeing in different directions. Now was the best time to flee. Otherwise, there would be no other opportunity. "You guys didn't *SS off when I told you to, yet you still want to leave now?" Ling Han said with a humph. He immediately leaped forward. Pung! His speed was indescribable, and he caught up to Xue Qingbai in an instant, killing him with a single punch. However, Rong Wenlin and Niu Tsangyu had already escaped into the distance, and he could only catch up to one of them. Whom should he choose? Ling Han gave a soft roar. Swoosh! He threw his divine demon sword, which transformed into a streak of light that shot toward Niu Tsangyu. Meanwhile, he dashed toward Rong Wenlin. Ah! There was a scream of agony as the divine demon sword pierced through Niu Tsangyu's shoulder, nailing him to the ground. The murderous aura of the divine demon sword rushed into his body, rapidly dismantling his battle prowess. Meanwhile, Rong Wenlin was also quickly hunted down by Ling Han. He tried to counterattack, but how could he possibly rival Ling Han? In a short few exchanges, he was brutally blasted into pieces. Ling Han casually swaggered back, arriving beside Niu Tsangyu. Niu Tsangyu looked up and begged for his life. Please forgive. Pooh! Ling Han stomped down, instantly crushing Niu Tsangyu's head. This was the eighth heaven celestial king to be killed. Ling Han retrieved his divine demon sword before looking at Gu Hei with a strange expression. You actually didn't flee? I, Gu Hei, have experienced countless battles in my life. I've never fled without even battling, Gu Hei said with a proud expression. Ling Han nodded, and said, because of your words, I've decided to erect a tombstone for you. Ling Han, you're far too arrogant. Gu Hei said with a humph. Even if your strength has soared, it's still nothing but a dream if you want to kill me. Then why don't we try? Ling Han strode forward with his sword. Even though he had killed 5 eighth heaven celestial kings in a row, the sum of their strength was still inferior to that of Gu Hei. Gu Hei also drew his sword. He then took a deep breath before saying, I'll borrow your strength to advance to the 8th heaven. Since Ling Han could advance during battle, he could definitely do so as well. Because he was Gu Hei. Chapter 2643, 10 Demons Soul Capturing Sword. Gu Hei was filled with confidence. Since Ling Han could advance during battle, he could definitely do so as well. In terms of talent alone, he was no weaker than anyone. Ling Han shook his head, saying, I'll behead you within 100 exchanges. Gu Hei remained silent. Ling Han was correct. If he didn't advance, he could only last 100 exchanges at most. However, he was confident that under this life and death pressure, this would be enough time. Ling Han also didn't speak anymore. At this time, it would be pointless to say anything else. He strode forward, bearing down on Gu Hei. Gu Hei held up his sword. This was a celestial tool, and at this moment, numerous symbols lit up, radiating with a terrifying aura. Ling Han lunged forward, stabbing with his sword. All of his fury gathered at the tip of his blade. When entering the martial academy, Gu Hei had already expressed hostility toward him. This was because Ling Han was the Empress lover. When entering an ancient ruin, Gu Hei had set up a deadly trap for Ling Han. However, because the heavenly venerate hadn't actually been dead, that had instead resulted in Gu Hei, Xiao Yingxiong, and the others almost being massacred completely. Now, the three of them had pursued Ling Han into the Celestial King graveyard, with their attacks almost leading to his death. Who could endure such villainy? In any case, Ling Han couldn't endure this. Accompanied by his roar, his divine demon sword unleashed a boundless radiance. It was as if he had become an invincible god of war. Come battle! Gu Hei roared as he charged forward with his sword. Clang! This was their first exchange, and Gu Hei was immediately sent flying, only coming to a halt after several hundred kilometers. His face was as white as a sheet, and his entire body was shaking slightly. One had to realize that Ling Han was purely relying on his body art at this moment, something that didn't depend on the regulations. Even though he couldn't draw on the power of heaven and earth, the strength of his body allowed him to unleash even more chaotic and destructive power. Gu Hei felt like every bone in his body was rattling. It was as if they were about to shatter at any moment. I overestimated you. Perhaps you can't even withstand 10 exchanges. Ling Han said in a calm voice. However, he felt pity in his mind. He had finally exhausted the power of the Dimension Scroll. In the future, he wouldn't be able to rely on it to elevate his body art anymore. Moreover, because he had relied on one of the 6 source powers of the Genesis world to temper his body, he would be unable to elevate his body art any further without this sort of power. He would be stuck at this level forever. This was unless he could absorb the 6 source powers again. However, that would at least have to wait until he reached the 9th heaven. However, Ling Han only felt slight pity. Right now, his evolution index had already reached 12, and he had more so mastered 3 heavenly venerate techniques. Thus, which celestial king would he fear? He charged forward again, not showing Gu Hei an inkling of mercy. Gu Hei met his attacks. However, he was completely unable to block them, and he was easily sent flying again. Wah! He violently vomited blood, and it was as if his insides had been turned upside down. In fact, he felt an urge to throw up even his internal organs. Gu Hei's expression changed drastically. Even though he was filled with confidence, the prerequisite to advancing under pressure was that he could cope with this pressure. For example, even though Ling Han had been riddled with wounds at that time, he had still been able to guard his own life. However, Gu Hei's situation was different. Each strike could seemingly send him into hell. At this point, this wasn't simple life and death pressure. Instead, these were strikes that could directly lead to his death. If this continued, to say nothing of advancing during battle, it was very likely that he would be killed before long. Fuse with my soul and spirit, he roared. He then grabbed at his head, forcefully extracting a streak of azure and white, and pressing them into his celestial tool. He practiced the 10-demon soul-capturing sword, a technique that could destroy one's soul and spirit. By sacrificing his own divine sense first, he could cause the might of his technique to increase tenfold. Of course, the price to pay was also huge. A person only had 3 souls and 7 spirits, so by sacrificing a soul and a spirit at this moment, he was causing irrevocable damage to his future. However, he had no other choice. If he didn't fight with his life, his only fate would be death. Moreover, Gu Hei firmly believed that he could advance during battle. Die! He charged forward with his divine sword, unleashing the 10-demon soul-capturing sword. His battle prowess instantly soared into the 9th heaven, finally giving him the right to rival Ling Han. His battle prowess was also at the 9th heaven. Ling Han roared with laughter. He naturally wouldn't be afraid. He slashed and hacked with his divine demon sword, facing Gu Hei's strikes head-on. Wang! Gu Hei unleashed a spiritual attack. However, it was a shame that Ling Han had already advanced, meaning that this kind of attack could only cause some slight pain in his mind. With Ling Han's willpower, he could naturally endure this with ease. As such, its effect on him was negligible. They continued to battle. Both prodigies displayed their might. However, even though Gu Hei had already gone as far as to cripple himself to raise his battle prowess, he was still slightly weaker than Ling Han. He was sent flying left and right by Ling Han, suffering a clear disadvantage. Gu Hei remained solemn and calm. At the very least, he had stabilized himself now. What he needed to do next was to advance. Ling Han shook his head. Gu Hei's expectations were far too idealistic. Advancing during battle required a lot of prerequisites to be fulfilled, the most important among them being that one had already reached the peak stage of a cultivation level. For example, why had Ling Han held back for so long just then? Was it not to refine the celestial fruits? This was a process of accumulation, something that required an exorbitant amount of time. However, advancing to the next level only required an opportunity. For example, facing life and death pressure. In such an environment, advancing might come swiftly and naturally. However, even though Gu Hei was already at the peak stage of the 7th heaven, he was still a small distance away from reaching the pinnacle. Otherwise, as a supreme monarch star, how would he need any celestial fruits? There would be no barriers to speak of, and he could directly advance to the next cultivation level. This amount of distance was nothing to Gu Hei. As long as he had a few dozen millions of years, he would definitely be able to overcome this distance and easily reach the 8th heaven. However, the problem was, could he endure until that time? Gu Hei had crippled himself to increase his battle prowess. How long could that last? Ling Han's left hand balled into a fist as he channeled the 3 lightning technique. He then buffed it with the 9 transformations divine scroll, allowing each of his punches to become chaotic and explosive. His physical body was his most terrifying and destructive weapon. Pang, pang, pang. Their exchanges were deafening, and Gu Hei finally started to suffer wounds. Blood sprayed through the air, and it was clear that his opponent's power had already exceeded his limits. Even after sacrificing a soul and a spirit, the 10-demon soul-capturing sword was still no match for Ling Han. Sacrifice another soul and spirit, Gu Hei said through gritted teeth. He grabbed another streak of azure and white from his head before pressing them into his celestial tool. His battle prowess instantly increased another 3-fold. Even though it was only 3-fold, this was 3-fold on top of the 10-fold that he had already experienced. In other words, this was a whopping 30-fold increase of his original battle prowess. At this moment, he could finally hold his own against Ling Han. Ling Han, I, Gu Hei, have never been weaker than anyone. Gu Hei roared. Ling Han scoffed, saying, I'm a level below you, and you've more so activated a sacrificial technique. Even so, you can only draw level with me, yet you still have the face to say that you've never been weaker than anyone? Gu Hei was instantly rendered speechless. He had felt far too stifled when being suppressed by Ling Han just then, so after finally drawing level, he felt as if he were gaining an advantage as the underdog. Yet, he had forgotten that Ling Han was only at the 6th heaven. This person was the true freak. How could Gu Hei compare with him? I don't believe this. Gu Hei roared. His fighting spirit raged, and he said, it's because of your immense fortune. It's because of this that you could extract the power from the dimension scroll. You're being helped by the heavens. Otherwise, at the same cultivation level, how could I be afraid of you? Not to mention that I have an advantage of 1 cultivation level. No matter how much nonsense you spew, you still can't change the fact that you're a loser. Ling Han said, with each word piercing into his opponent's heart like a dagger. His divine demon sword thrust forth, not showing an iota of mercy. Chapter 2644, Foregone Conclusion. Gu Hei was unable to respond. No matter how confident he felt, he was unable to change the reality that Ling Han was a cultivation level below him. Even so, Gu Hei still needed to cripple himself in order to raise his cultivation level. Only by doing so could he rival Ling Han. There was no need for comparisons. The gulf between them was clear with a single glance. However, Gu Hei was a monarch star, after all. He had experienced countless battles during his lifetime, so how could he be shaken so easily? He immediately hardened his resolve. What did it matter that Ling Han was more freakish than him? Once Gu Hei reached the 8th heaven, he would be able to kill Ling Han. Regardless of how talented a dead person once was, what difference could this make? Die. Gu Hei activated the 10-demon soul-capturing sword, unleashing a profound might. He also knew about his own weaknesses, so he started to ingest all kinds of pills. At this moment, he no longer cared about whether he could absorb the effects of all these pills or not. This was his only opportunity, so he naturally had to take a risk. However, Ling Han wasn't worried at all. If Gu Hei could truly advance like this, then that would be viewing cultivation in far too simplistic a manner. Ling Han swung his sword again and again, with each strike being powerful enough to shatter countless heavenly bodies. Right now, Ling Han was far too powerful. His body art was fused together with the power of regulations, causing his battle prowess to directly soar to the 9th heaven. Reaching each subsequent heaven was as difficult as ascending the heavens. Thus, a difference of one cultivation level was like the gulf between heaven and earth. The ninth heaven was more so an insurmountable barrier. Overcoming this barrier would elevate one's battle prowess by an immense amount. Gu He could just barely hold on. However, he would need to pay a huge price each time he blocked Ling Han's strike. This was an identical situation to what Ling Han had faced before. Now, Ling Han's opponent was riddled with wounds, with blood drenching his body, his bones also showing. He appeared as miserable as could be. Gu He roared in fury. However, he didn't dare to sacrifice his soul and spirit again. Otherwise, he would die on the spot. However, if this continued, he would also be struggling in vain. If he continued to battle, he would definitely be killed. He couldn't go on like this. With a long roar, he turned around to flee. If he lived, there would still be hope. He was only a step away from reaching the eighth heaven, so once he overcame this barrier, he could return to suppress Ling Han. He would definitely succeed. Ling Han snickered, saying, "Who said they would never flee in fear?" He chased after Gu He. Even though he couldn't draw much power from the regulations, the explosive power of his body art was immense. With a single step, he instantly caught up. He then threw a punch with his left hand. Gu He had no option but to block this strike. Boom, clang, boom. Their swords clanged and their fists collided as they started to battle head-on again. This hurt Gu He far too much. However, Ling Han was relentless, so the former had no option but to block his strikes. Otherwise, he would definitely be hit. In his current state, how would he dare to take another hit from Ling Han? Gu He vomited blood. Even though he could still block Ling Han right now, the divine sense that he had sacrificed was already about to disappear. The might of the 10 demon soul capturing sword was decreasing drastically, so how would he block Ling Han afterward? Even though he could still struggle to block Ling Han at this moment, it was as if he could already see the god of death waving at him. If there were no reinforcements, it was inevitable that Gu He would be killed. However, who would save him at this moment? Gu He gritted his teeth as he continued to resist. However, he couldn't turn the tables at all. At some point in time, his battle prowess suddenly dropped off a cliff. The divine sense that he had sacrificed had already burned up. It was unable to help him anymore. Gu He's expression instantly became ashen. In his current state, he would struggle to block another strike from Ling Han. Trash from the outside world, die. Right at this moment, however, there was a deep rumble as a person shot over from the distance. He radiated with a powerful aura, and he was more so surrounded by numerous ribbons of iridescent light that were even brighter than the stars. Reinforcements? Delight appeared on Gu He's face. However, upon seeing 8 ribbons of iridescent light around the person, his expression of hope and delight involuntarily turned into disappointment. How could an 8th heaven celestial king block the 9th heaven battle prowess of Ling Han? Unless it was a supreme monarch star like Xiao Yingxiong and Miao Hua. Ling Han naturally saw this as well, and he wasn't worried at all. He slashed down with his sword. Pooh! Gu He was instantly cut into 2. Wang! His divine sword fell from his hand, and flew into the distance. A prodigy was erased from the world just like that. Celestial Tool, the 8th heaven celestial king who had just arrived, exclaimed. He was overcome with delight. He had only charged over because he had heard the news that there were 2 outsiders here. However, he hadn't expected that he would receive such a valuable present. This was a celestial tool. In this place, even 9th heaven celestial kings could barely get their hands on such a treasure. He quickly dashed forward. Whoosh! He caught up to Gu He's divine sword, and grabbed it in his hand. The celestial tool instantly unleashed its might, with a gleam of cold light slashing at the celestial king. This was a treasure refined by Gu He, so even though it hadn't reached his level, its might was still extraordinary. Its creator had been a supreme monarch star, after all. It was more than powerful enough to rival the 8th Heaven Celestial King. The 8th Heaven Celestial King was overjoyed, and he was completely focused on trying to obtain the celestial tool. Only after failing to obtain it after a dozen attempts did he finally feel astonishment. This celestial tool had had an owner before, yet this person had already been killed. That being the case, just how powerful was his opponent? Right now, was he not trying to snatch prey from a tiger's mouth? Was he not seeking death? With this in mind, he involuntarily stopped his movements in fright. Scanning the surroundings with his divine sense, he indeed discovered Ling Han standing 90 meters away, his arms crossed before his chest as if he were enjoying a show. The celestial tool didn't seize this opportunity to counterattack either, instead turning around to flee into the clouds. Get down. Ling Han reached out to grab at the divine sword. You're asking for trouble, the 8th Heaven Celestial King said in his mind. Without battle prowess at the 9th heaven, how could anyone possibly face a celestial tool head-on? That was the most supreme being in the level of regulations. However, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets in the next instant. This was because Ling Han directly grabbed the divine sword with his bare hand. Not the sword's hilt, but the sword's blade. Fuck. He's a freak. Cold sweat instantly drenched the 8th Heaven Celestial King. He couldn't help but shake in fear. Ling Han tightly gripped the blade of the sword. If this celestial tool were being wielded by a 9th Heaven Celestial King, he definitely wouldn't dare to grab it just like that. This was because the combination of their power could definitely slice through his skin and even wound his godly bones. It was possible that they could directly sever his fingers. However, this was a sword with no owner, so it could at most only unleash a battle prowess at the peak stage of the 8th heaven. Thus, did Ling Han need to be afraid? No matter how sharp a weapon, it still needed an owner to unleash its true might. Ling Han smiled faintly as he placed restriction after restriction on the celestial tool, sealing its power. He then tossed it into his celestial guest residence. He would slowly refine this celestial tool in the future. After doing this, he turned to the 8th Heaven Celestial King with a smile, and said, "What did you say just then?" The 8th Heaven Celestial King wore an awkward expression. He had failed to suppress the celestial tool after several dozen exchanges, yet Ling Han dealt with it in a single grab. The gulf between them was as clear as day. The man hurriedly forced a smile, and said, "This junior was saying that senior is far too mighty." In a single glance, it's clear that senior is a dragon among men and as domineering as can be. An 8th Heaven Celestial King was actually referring to a 6th Heaven Celestial King as senior? Ling Han was astonished. This person was an 8th Heaven Celestial King, after all, so how could he be so shameless? Whoosh! At this moment, the 8th Heaven Celestial King suddenly turned around to flee. He hadn't placed his hopes on Ling Han being benevolent. Instead, he had purposefully tricked Ling Han into lowering his guard, buying himself time to flee. Once he set off, even 9th Heaven Celestial Kings would find it difficult to catch up to him. However, just as he started to flee, he suddenly discovered that there was already a person standing before him, with their hands clasped behind their back. It was as if they were taking a casual stroll. Who was this person if not Ling Han? Chapter 2645, Fourth Land of Inheritance. How is he so quick? The 8th Heaven Celestial King was both astonished and terrified. He had clearly moved before Ling Han, yet Ling Han had already appeared before him. "Why are you fleeing?" Ling Han asked. "This." The 8th Heaven Celestial King's eyes darted around for a moment before he replied, "This junior's bladder is about to burst, so I wanted to find somewhere to relieve myself." Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. This person was indeed shameless, shameless to the extreme. Ling Han harbored no good feelings toward those in the Celestial King graveyard, and even less so now that they were affected by the black energy. Even though this person appeared honest and respectful now, this was merely because Ling Han was more powerful than him. If their positions had been reversed, this 8th heaven celestial king would have definitely revealed his fangs already. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "Since you've come to kill the outsider that I am, why don't you attack?" The 8th heaven celestial king hurriedly shook his head, saying, "Senior, you truly like to joke. How could a mighty and powerful person such as yourself possibly be an outsider? You're definitely one of us." Ling Han felt speechless. He casually swung his sword, causing the 8th heaven celestial king to hurriedly stumble back in fright. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. His attacks became faster and faster, and the 8th heaven celestial king only managed to dodge 3 strikes before being sliced into 2. Swoosh. Ling Han leaped into the air, and immediately soared into the distance. After making it far away enough, he entered the celestial guest residence. Even though he appeared mighty and invincible, the wounds that he had suffered before were no laughing matter. It was only because his fighting spirit had been far too ferocious that he had suppressed these wounds the entire time. Now that his enemies had been exterminated, he naturally needed to take a rest to heal his wounds. This rest lasted an entire 130,000 years. Ling Han was not only recovering from his wounds, but he was also using this opportunity to stabilize his cultivation. With the acceleration of time, this 130,000 years was also transformed into 130 million years. Thus, his cultivation was naturally stabilized. In fact, he even made some further progress. This kind of brutal battle where they exchanged wounds and risked their lives was most beneficial to elevating their cultivation. Of course, the prerequisite was that they weren't killed or wounded too severely. The Empress also managed to stabilize her cultivation. Moreover, because she had no wounds to recover from, her advancement was even quicker than Ling Han's. However, the difference wasn't that great. After all, at the 6th heaven, unless they had the help of some great herb, it might require hundreds of billions of years to advance a single level. Thus, what was over 100 million years in this context? Ling Han and the Empress held hands as they exited the celestial guest residence. Their adventure in this place had yet to conclude. During this time, Ling Han had naturally fed Gu Hei's celestial tool to the divine demon sword as well. However, it was far too hard to elevate a celestial tool into a heavenly venerate tool. This was like the gulf between 9th heaven celestial kings and heavenly veneratesses wide as heaven and earth. It was hard to say how much more divine metal he would need. Gu Hei's wealth was astonishing. After all, he was a supreme monarch star and a big shot of the martial academy. He had more so been a celestial king for heaven knows how many years. Thus, even Ling Han was given a small surprise. However, it was a shame that there were no treasures to increase his cultivation. This was very normal. If such treasures had existed, they would have already been used by Gu Hei and helped him reach the 8th heaven. In that case, Ling Han might not have been able to kill him with a single slash. Ling Han used these resources to elevate his physique. Practicing the indestructible heaven scroll required such weird and wonderful trinkets. Right now, Ling Han's physique had already advanced another step, reaching the 7th heaven. Compared to his battle prowess, however, it was greatly inferior. Xiao Yingxiong and Miao Hua are likely very wealthy as well. If I can obtain their wealth, perhaps my indestructible celestial king physique can near a consummate level. Ling Han and the Empress set off again. Their 5 elements lightning technique was still 2 elements short. Right now, they could genuinely run around without a fear in the world. Ling Han already possessed a 9th heaven battle prowess, while the Empress could also reach the peak stage of the 8th heaven in terms of strength with the help of her celestial tool. Each of them was powerful enough to hold their own. Even so, the hunt for their heads didn't cease. The people here detested outsiders who came to train far too much. However, it was a shame that they were merely seeking death and handing their wealth over on a platter. Ling Han felt it a pity, however, that these people were far too poor. Killing them didn't reap many benefits. Their travels continued for 7 years, and during this time, a countless number of 8th heaven celestial kings had died at their hands. Moreover, Ling Han hadn't needed to deal with them at all. Indeed, the Empress was powerful enough to dispose of them by herself. This also caused them to appear increasingly dangerous to the others. During the past 2 years, no more 8th Heaven Celestial Kings had charged over to kill them. Strangely enough, however, 9th Heaven Celestial Kings hadn't appeared either. Ling Han remembered that he had killed many second-generation young masters, so why had these 9th Heaven Celestial Kings still not shown themselves? Perhaps some supreme treasure had appeared in this realm? Perhaps these elites were locked in an intense battle and unable to leave? Several days later, a mountain appeared before the couple. This was a dazzling golden mountain. Looking closely, however, it was clear that many swords had been stabbed into the mountain, making it look like it was filled with spikes. Between these swords, arcs of golden lightning crackled. Lightning of metal. Ling Han and the Empress exclaimed as they exchanged a glance. Their faces were filled with delight. This was the 4th land of inheritance. They continued forward, arriving at the foot of the mountain. Wang! The mountain face shuddered slightly before 7 swords automatically flew up and turned toward them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 7 swords slashed at Ling Han and the Empress in unison. These weren't ordinary attacks, and the swords had instead formed a formation. Thus, even though there were only 7 swords, their might was as if they were an army of tens and thousands. The Empress stepped forward to battle against the 7 swords. Pung! 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 After a while, the Empress successfully suppressed the 7 swords. However, she had a short temper, so she directly shattered them. Daring to attack her was a sign of great disrespect. Thus, they naturally deserved to be shattered. The 2 of them continued to climb the mountain. After taking a few steps, another 9 swords flew up and started to attack them. Here, battling was the main theme. They would trigger the swords each time they advanced a few steps, and the number of swords that attacked them would also increase every time. The formations the blades created would also become increasingly complex, thereby raising their might as well. Fortunately, both Ling Han and the Empress were incredibly powerful people. Thus, they were unafraid regardless of how many swords attacked them. There was no one else on the mountain. However, this made sense. If one hadn't received the inheritances of the 3 previous areas, why would they waste their time here? Battling against these swords would reap no benefit at all. Wife, have you realized? If we want to obtain the inheritance of this place, the key might lie in the formations formed by the swords, Ling Han said. The Empress nodded in agreement. The sword formations were ever-changing, so perhaps understanding them would allow them to comprehend the secret of this mountain. They could then find the formation eye and trigger its magnificent power. At that time, they could not only obtain another inheritance, but perhaps even elevate their cultivation. With this in mind, the Empress stopped destroying the swords after defeating them. The 2 of them started to wander around the mountain, battling against the different sword formations, and obtaining all kinds of enlightenment. After half a year, they exchanged a glance and smiled in unison. They had already grasped the secret of this mountain. Let's go. They climbed the mountain again. This time, however, they took a different path from before. Strangely, no more swords flew up to form a formation and attack them. In just half a day, they reached the peak of the mountain. It wasn't that they hadn't reached the mountain peak before, it was just that they were greeted by a completely different scene this time. This was the mystery and wonder of formations. However, there was a person sitting cross-legged in the center of the mountain peak, surrounded by countless small golden swords. Looking closely, these swords weren't corporeal, but instead were formed with energy. Ling Han frowned upon seeing this. Yingxiong. Chapter 2646, 2646 Battling Yingxiong again. 2646 Battling Yingxiong again. The person sitting cross-legged on the mountain peak was none other than Yingxiong. However, this made sense. He wasn't blood brothers with Gu Hui or Miao Hua, and they had only entered the Celestial King graveyard together in order to hunt and kill Ling Han. Thus, when they came across opportunities, they would naturally do what was in their own interests. However, Ling Han truly hadn't imagined that Yingxiong would actually obtain the inheritance of this place before them. Shua. At this moment, Yingxiong suddenly opened his eyes. Two sword projections instantly flashed across them, and there was more so the brilliance of lightning. He stood up. Crackle. His entire body radiated with the might of lightning, and he wore a haughty expression as he looked at Ling Han, and asked, "Have you come here to seek death?" Ling Han naturally wouldn't back down, saying, "I coincidentally want to kill you as well. Who knew that I would find you so easily?" Haha. Can you? Yingxiong said in disdain. Ling Han smiled faintly, saying, Gu Hei has already been killed by me. You'll be the second. Yingxiong was slightly astonished. When he was parting ways with Gu Hei, the latter had already been at the late stage of the seventh heaven. After so long, he would have reached the peak stage of the seventh heaven no matter what, right? Yet, he was still killed by Ling Han. Ling Han's strength had soared again. However, a proud expression immediately appeared on Yingxiong's face as he said, "Gu Hei is Gu Hei, and I am me." As he said this, he didn't conceal his strength any longer. Boom! A devastating aura surged into the surroundings like crashing waves. At the same time, several ribbons of iridescent light also materialized around his body. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8. 8 ribbons. He was clearly an 8th heaven celestial king. Ha 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 ha. Yingxiong roared with laughter. You guys have come too late. Not only have I obtained the inheritance of the sword formation, but I've even obtained boundless power. I already advanced to the 8th heaven 50,000 years ago. An 8th heaven supreme monarch star who had stabilized their cultivation definitely possessed astonishing battle prowess. They could reach the middle stage or even late stage of the 9th heaven in terms of power. Ling Han was unafraid. He had already stabilized his cultivation, and his battle prowess certainly wasn't weak either. Stop speaking nonsense. Come battle. Ling Han immediately drew his sword, and pointed it at Yingxiong. Haha. I've advanced to the 8th heaven, and I've more so mastered a paramount secret technique. I'll take this opportunity to use you as a blood sacrifice. Yingxiong said with arrogance. He hooked his finger, and said, Come at me. Ling Han didn't hold back. Pang! With a bound, he instantly unleashed a terrifying speed, arriving before Yingxiong in a flash. He then stabbed with his sword. Wang! As he attacked, Ling Han's cultivation was also revealed, with his 6th heaven aura suffusing into the surroundings. Oh, 6th heaven! Yingxiong said in astonishment. He genuinely hadn't imagined that Ling Han would advance so quickly. In fact, Ling Han's cultivation speed was far quicker than his. How long had passed? Yet, the gulf between them had already been reduced to 2 levels. This wasn't the mountain river tier or severing mundane tier, where ingesting any random celestial medicine could allow one's cultivation to soar in leaps and bounds. It was only because Yingxiong had obtained great opportunities the United Origin Manifestation Fruit could allow 9th heaven celestial kings to become pseudo-heavenly venerates, and this sword mountain had more so accumulated power for heaven knows how many years that he had advanced from the 6th heaven to the 8th heaven. After a brief moment of astonishment, he quickly recovered his fervent killing intent. This young person was even more talented than him, so he definitely couldn't be left alive. Otherwise, there would eventually come a day when Yingxiong was surpassed. Yingxiong drew his spear, and used it like a staff. Pang, pang, pang. As he swung his spear, the regulations in the surroundings were instantly sent into disarray. This was due to both his own power and the power of the celestial tool. Through what did celestial kings display their might? Regulations. Now, however, the regulations had already been sent into chaos, so how could they still be used? Yingxiong's strike directly targeted the foundation, highlighting his experience and tact in battle. He smiled coldly. With his first strike, he had already gained an upper hand using his superior cultivation level. Afterward, he would follow up with a flurry of relentless attacks and completely shatter Ling Han's defenses. Ding! The divine demon sword struck the spear, causing numerous symbols to pulsate. This was a clash between the great Tao. Neither of them retreated. They were evenly matched. Yingxiong was truly astounded at this moment. Ling Han actually possessed the power to rival him? How was this possible? The regulations had already been scattered by him, so where had Ling Han obtained his power from? One had to realize that without the help of regulations, celestial kings would fall to the level of the severing mundane tier. Ling Han unleashed his power, shaking his right arm. Pung! Yingxiong was instantly sent flying. He brandished his sword, saying, "So what if I'm at the sixth heaven?" Yingxiong was rendered speechless for a moment. He then said, "Now I truly believe that you killed Gu Hei. Your body art is astonishing, and combined with the power of regulations, your strength is no weaker than mine." He was a supreme monarch star, so if he refused to admit even this, he couldn't have made it to such a lofty height. "However, I can still kill you." His eyes gleamed with a divine light, showing off his confidence. Ling Han roared with laughter. "Don't say things the wrong way around. I'm the one who's going to kill you. In your dreams," Yingxiong said as he stabbed with his spear. While in the martial academy, even though there was a notion of strong and weak among Yingxiong, Gu Hei, and Miao Hua, the gap between them had been narrow and almost insignificant. After advancing to the eighth heaven and stabilizing his cultivation, however, Yingxiong's battle prowess was far superior to Gu Hei's. Yingxiong's spear stabbed, swept, and pushed, controlling the regulations in a terrifying display. Ling Han was at an absolute disadvantage in terms of wielding the regulations. There was no way for him to make up for the two-level gap between them. However, his body art was far too powerful, and it didn't need to rely on external power. There was no need to borrow power from heaven and earth, and this was genuinely power that he possessed. He swung his divine demon sword, with his left hand casting the three lightning technique. He launched a barrage of chaotic attacks at Yingxiong. "Huh! You also mastered this kind of lightning technique?" Yingxiong exclaimed in astonishment. He hadn't obtained similar inheritances before, and it was only after arriving here that he had coincidentally obtained this inheritance. However, Ling Han had surprisingly mastered similar lightning techniques as well. Even though they were slightly different, it was extremely clear that they were derived from the same origin. "Haha! I'm going to kill you and then search your soul. I'm going to obtain all of these inheritances," Yingxiong said with roaring laughter. Ling Han chuckled coldly. "Keep dreaming." Yingxiong didn't reply. Instead, he unleashed the full power of his spear. Ling Han wasn't weak either, with his battle prowess being no inferior to that of Yingxiong. Moreover, the divine demon sword was also superior to ordinary celestial tools. After several thousand exchanges, there was a clang as an edge of the celestial spear was chipped. Yingxiong was deeply astonished, and he hurriedly chased after the chipped piece. However, he was blocked by Ling Han and unable to retrieve it. After a period of struggle, the chipped piece was eventually obtained by Ling Han. Yingxiong wore a pained expression. That was divine metal. Even though it was a chipped piece, divine metal possessed the ability of regeneration. Thus, with enough time, this piece could eventually fuse back together with the spear. Now that Ling Han had obtained it, however, unless Yingxiong killed the former, he would be unable to get it back. Both were celestial tools, so how was his inferior to Ling Han's? "Perhaps, that sword was forged from devouring metal," he said in deep astonishment. Only devouring metal could engulf divine metal to raise its level, thereby exceeding the level of divine metal and eventually becoming heavenly venerable tier metal. He wore an expression of extreme envy as he looked at Ling Han. That was devouring metal. Something that could eventually become heavenly venerable tier metal. Yet, it was now in the hands of a sixth heaven celestial king. Just how fortunate was he? Did this signify the blessing of heaven and earth? Yingxiong took a deep breath. What did it matter even if Ling Han were blessed by heaven and earth? Yingxiong possessed absolute strength, so he would take it for himself. Chapter 2647, 2647 Final Destination. 2647 Final Destination. Die. Yingxiong roared as he unleashed his full strength and charged at Ling Han. Wang. His spear thrust forward, yet 7 bursts of golden sword light were unleashed. They were more so enveloped in lightning, appearing as weird as could be. This was the inheritance that he had obtained from this sword mountain, the lightning of metal. Wang. A spiritual attack surged over at the same time, extremely precise and potent in nature. Pain immediately stabbed at Ling Han's mind, causing his vision to go dark. The spiritual attack of an 8th heaven supreme monarch star was far too terrifying, and was far superior to what Gu He could unleash. However, Ling Han had already increased the level of the indestructible heaven scroll. Even though it still had yet to reach the 8th heaven, it had still advanced, after all. Thus, it was naturally able to better resist spiritual attacks. Ling Han guarded his mind as he continued to slash with his divine demon sword, launching a powerful counterattack. Ding, ding, ding. The two of them were locked in an intense battle. In terms of strength, there was truly little difference between them. However, it was definitely Ling Han who had the advantage. This was because his divine demon sword was forged from devouring metal, allowing its sharpness to be superior to ordinary celestial tools. After fighting for an extended period of time, other celestial tools would all be severed or shattered by the divine demon sword. After several thousand more exchanges, Yingxiong's spear lost another piece. This was something that he couldn't accept. If his celestial tool were shattered, what else would he use to block Ling Han's divine demon sword? Just you wait. Yingxiong roared in rage. He forced Ling Han back with a flick of his spear before turning around to leave. The day that I obtain all of the lightning technique inheritances will be the day that I cut off your head. He was completely unable to capture Ling Han at this moment. In fact, he was even at a disadvantage. Thus, he resolutely decided to leave, not hesitating in the least. Ling Han didn't give chase. He wasn't any stronger than Yingxiong, and he had only just obtained victory thanks to his divine demon sword. Let's obtain the inheritance of this place. The more lightning techniques that we fuse together, the more powerful they'll become. Ling Han said to the Empress. In any case, Yingxiong had fled already, so they only needed to worry about raising their own strength. The Empress nodded in agreement. Right now, she desired power even more than Ling Han. This was because she had been unable to help during the battle just then. She was an extremely proud person, so how could she accept this? The two of them walked to the center of the mountain peak, replacing Yingxiong. They had already obtained the secrets of the sword formation, so numerous golden symbols immediately materialized in their minds. However, no power entered their body this time, as it had all been absorbed by Yingxiong. If they wanted to obtain more power, they would need to wait for 1 or 2 epochs for this sword mountain to recover. Similarly, even if Yingxiong found the other lands of inheritance, he would only be able to obtain the inheritance of the 3 lightning techniques. He wouldn't be able to obtain the power of those lands anymore. Obtaining the secret technique was very quick. Without the process of acquiring power, grasping the inheritance only took Ling Han and the Empress several days. Because they were afraid of Yingxiong charging back and launching a surprise attack on them as they cultivated, they decided to leave the Sword Mountain and enter the celestial guest residence. After tens of thousands of years, the two of them finally mastered the lightning of metal, and fused it together with the 3 lightning technique, creating the 4 lightning technique. Even though only one of the 5 elements is missing, the might of this technique is still far inferior, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. This was clear when looking at the indestructible heaven scroll. This was also a heavenly venerate technique, and just how powerful was it? The 5 elements lightning technique was most likely not weak. However, Ling Han was confident that if he advanced the indestructible heaven scroll to an equivalent level, the 4 lightning technique would definitely be unable to breach its defenses. There was only a single reason for this: they hadn't gathered all 5 elements yet. As such, this heavenly venerate technique was unable to unleash its full might. In fact, it was possible that it could only unleash 1/10 of its might. Going from 4 to 5 elements would be a qualitative change. Then we need to obtain the 5th inheritance as soon as possible, the Empress said. Ling Han nodded in agreement, saying, "We have to obtain it before Yingxiong. Otherwise, they would indeed obtain the inheritance, but they would miss out on the power." They exited the celestial guest residence, and continued to advance. 4 of the 5 lands of inheritance had already appeared, yet it was clear that they were already about to reach the end of this ancient tomb. Large expanses of mountains and rivers flashed past beneath them, with the couple not stopping to communicate with any of the people that they passed. Right now, they only had a single goal: to reach the 5th land of inheritance. Even though they didn't waste any time communicating with others, there were always those who obtained information far too slowly. These people had only just received the news that Ling Han and the Empress were outsiders who had come here to train. Thus, they especially rushed over to attack them. However, how could 8th Heaven Celestial Kings possibly rival the 2 of them? These people were naturally suppressed in an instant. However, Ling Han and the Empress also learned some secrets from these Celestial Kings. According to rumors, the end of this ancient tomb not only held the inheritances of paramount techniques, but it even had a passageway that led out of the Celestial King graveyard. However, the prerequisite was that one reached the 9th heaven. Thus, all of the 9th heaven Celestial Kings had already gone to that place. Ling Han leaned toward believing this. This was because they indeed hadn't been attacked by any 9th heaven Celestial Kings. However, whether or not this rumor was true needed to be confirmed. Desolate Moon. It was Desolate Moon who had led people into this ancient tomb, and he had even tossed out 3 scrolls of the 9 transformations divine scroll. If it were said that the combined strength of countless celestial kings was required to open the path to this ancient tomb, Ling Han would definitely believe this. However, to offer 3 scrolls of the 9 transformations divine scroll for this? Ling Han certainly didn't believe this. This was because simply spreading news about this large tomb would definitely be enticing enough by itself. The truth was most likely hidden at the end of the ancient tomb. Ling Han glanced at the Empress, and she replied with a nod. With their strength, they could attempt to explore that area. 7 months later, they arrived before an unbelievably grand palace. It towered into the clouds, and it was surrounded by arcs of lightning. It appeared dignified and profound. This was the final destination of this ancient tomb. They knew this because there was only a boundless expanse of void after this palace. This void couldn't be traversed. Looking from the outside, this palace appeared as desolate as could be. It was as if it were an abandoned land. All of the 9th heaven celestial kings are inside here. This is truly uncanny. If so many 9th heaven celestial kings are inside there, why isn't there any noise or commotion? Ling Han said in a soft voice. The Empress tightened her grip on her celestial tool. Meanwhile, her left hand held onto Ling Han's right. Ling Han smiled as he clasped his hand around the Empress' slender hand. They then strode forward. This palace was far too tall, so there was actually still a long distance to travel between seeing it and actually arriving before it. When they arrived before the gates of the palace, they saw a group of people furiously attacking the gates. Strangely, however, it was clear that the gates of the palace were wide open. However, like a crashing waterfall, bolts of lightning blocked the entrance. This was a group of 4 people. They were attacking in unison, yet the wall of lightning remained completely unaffected. They were unable to pass it. Upon sensing Ling Han and the Empress' arrival, the 4 people immediately stopped their attacks and turned around. A smile involuntarily spread across Ling Han's face. This world was truly far too small. This was none other than Wang Dongsen and the others, the second-generation young masters from prosperous opening city. In the past, their group had consisted of more than 4 people. However, it was likely that some of them had died on their way here. After all, this wasn't prosperous opening city where they could act as they pleased. Li Long. Wang Dongsen immediately exclaimed upon seeing Ling Han. When Xiao Yingxiong and the others had attacked Ling Han before, they had caught sight of Ling Han's true appearance. Thus, they immediately recognized him. Ling Han's voice was calm as he said, "Immediately piss off if you don't want to die." What an arrogant person. Wang Dongsen said in great displeasure. He was a 7th heaven celestial king, so Ling Han should have referred to him as senior or lord when seeing him. Yet, he actually dared to tell him to piss off. Even though Ling Han could escape from the clutches of Xiao Yingxiong and the others, signifying his strength, could he possibly rival Wang Dongsen? You ruined my father's grand plans. See how I chop off your head. Chapter 2648, 2648 5 Elements Lightning. 2648 5 Elements Lightning. Wang Dongsen had good reason to hate Ling Han. If Zhang Feiyu had successfully remained hidden in Ghost King City at that time, the Ghost King City would have eventually been conquered by prosperous opening city. However, because of Ling Han, their plans had all been ruined. In the end, prosperous opening city had needed to sacrifice a great deal to calm the fury of Ghost King City. Ling Han was naturally to blame for all of this. Thus, not only did Tang Mingbo, Lu Gaoquan, and the others want to kill Ling Han, but even those from prosperous opening city wanted him dead. Now that they had come across each other, Wang Dongsen was naturally red-eyed with anger. How noisy! Ling Han said as he launched a palm strike at Wang Dongsen. At this moment, how could he treat Wang Dongsen with any sense of seriousness? Only 9th heaven celestial kings or supreme monarch stars like Xiao Yingxiong and Miao Hua could be viewed as his opponents. This kind of insignificant person would be killed with a single slap. They didn't deserve to waste his time. You're seeking death. Wang Dongsen roared upon seeing Ling Han's dismissive attitude. He was enraged, and he crossed his hands as he unleashed a celestial technique, summoning a frightening battle prowess. He then launched an attack at Ling Han. As his celestial technique circulated, it transformed into a golden dragon turtle that reared its head. Its maw was filled with razor-sharp teeth, each formed from a symbol. Ling Han's palm strike arrived. Pung! The dragon turtle was immediately reduced to smithereens. The large hand continued to press down, crushing Wang Dongsen, who was wearing an expression of shock and disbelief. As a measly 7th heaven emperor tier, how could he possibly block a casual strike from Ling Han? A rain of blood descended, landing on the faces and bodies of the 3 other people. They finally recovered from their shock and regained their senses. As powerful as Wang Dongsen was, he was actually killed by Ling Han in a single strike. The 3 of them exchanged a glance before fleeing, not even daring to think about doing battle. The Empress immediately lashed out, casually unleashing 3 sword strikes to kill them. It seems like these gates aren't easy to enter, Ling Han said. There's not a single 9th heaven celestial king in sight, so these gates clearly can't stop them, the Empress said with a nod. Ling Han walked over, saying, let's give it a go. He raised his foot, making contact with the wall of lightning. The bolts of lightning wavered as if they were about to unleash a devastating strike. However, they immediately calmed down again as if they approved of Ling Han. Ling Han was astonished. These bolts of lightning were just about to attack me, yet the 4 lightning technique within me suddenly started to circulate. The 2 reached resonance, and these bolts of lightning ceased their attack. The Empress also walked forward to try. Sure enough, this was the case. By the looks of it, the final inheritance is inside this palace, the Empress said. The 2 of them entered the palace, only to be greeted by an expanse of emptiness. All that they could see were towering columns that were 300 meters in diameter. The golden floor tiles also reflected a dazzling and colorful brilliance. Where are the people? Where have they all gone? The two of them continued to advance. After a short while, they reached the end of the level. What appeared before them was a flight of stairs. They walked up the stairs to the second level. After wandering around the second level, they arrived before a set of stairs to the third level. Repeating this process again and again, they eventually arrived on the ninth level. This level was finally different. The floor tiles weren't golden, but instead multicolored and extremely varied. By the looks of it, the inheritance should be here. The two of them continued to walk around. However, in contrast to before, this place didn't unleash any attacks at them. After circling around the entire level, both Ling Han and the Empress wore expressions of puzzlement. They hadn't discovered any clues. They walked around several more times, trying to use different methods to analyze the situation. However, they were still unable to make any inroads. Perhaps, this is only a decoy? Let's go upstairs to take a look. They arrived on the 10th level, only to discover that this level was also decorated with multicolored floor tiles. What the heck? They wandered around this level as well, yet they were still unable to make head nor tail of the situation. They went up another level, only to discover that the 11th level was identical as well. Then the 12th, 13th, and all the way up to the 18th level. All of these levels were decorated with multicolored floor tiles. However, starting from the 19th level, the floor tiles returned to their original appearance again. The 20th and 21st levels were also like that. Ling Han and the Empress didn't go up to the 22nd level. Instead, they made their way back down. I'm sure that the final inheritance is here, Ling Han said. The Empress nodded in agreement. We should consider the 9 levels together. They returned to the first 9 levels, and committed all of the multicolored floor tiles to memory. They then visualized them in their minds. If we stack the 9 levels together, and only consider the floor tiles with the same overlapping colors, it actually forms a word. Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes and exclaimed in surprise. The 16th level, the 967th row, the 3666th column, the Empress said. They hurriedly made their way to the 16th level, and found the corresponding floor tile. After stepping on it, they once again recalled the image of the 9 levels stacked together. An extremely powerful intent instantly surged into their minds. This heavenly venerate is primordial ancient. Now that I'm venturing off to face hysteria, it's difficult to say whether there will be a day of return. I fear the loss of my Tao, so I've especially left 5 lands of inheritance. Only those who have obtained the 4 previous inheritances have the right to enter this hall and obtain my ultimate technique. Boom! Immediately afterward, countless arcs of lightning flashed in their minds, forming symbol after symbol. This was the final piece of the 5 elements lightning technique, the lightning of earth. However, it was a shame that this final land of inheritance wasn't a formation. Thus, there was naturally no bestowal of power. However, compared to obtaining a heavenly venerate technique, the elevation of one's cultivation could completely be pushed aside and ignored. After all, this only required time. The inheritance was swift, and the two of them reopened their eyes after only 7 days. They both wore expressions of delight. After walking some distance away, they entered the celestial guest residence to immediately fuse the 5 different lightning techniques together. This would allow them to obtain the genuine heavenly venerate technique. Mastering the lightning of earth was actually very simple. Ling Han completed this process in only 3,000 years. However, fusing the 5 lightning techniques together would be far more difficult. This was because the separated techniques could only be counted as celestial king techniques, rendering them easy to grasp. However, the fused technique was a genuine heavenly venerate technique, so it was naturally incredibly difficult to master. We still need to thank the primordial ancient heavenly venerate for splitting the 5 elements lightning technique into 5 separate techniques. As long as one manages to comprehend the 5 elements and their birth of all matter, one will have a sliver of a chance to grasp this heavenly venerate technique. Otherwise, even 9th heaven celestial kings will struggle to grasp this technique. No wonder it's said that each heavenly venerate is unique. Ling Han sighed with emotion. He then sat still with his legs crossed, silently activating his time physique. He wanted to grasp this paramount technique as quickly as possible. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. 10,000 years, 1 million years, 10 million years. Time quickly flashed by, with 40 million years having already passed. Inside the celestial guest residence, Ling Han and the Empress were under the influence of accelerated time. Thus, accounting for this, they had already experienced a whopping 40 billion years. On some day, Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes, with an arc of lightning flashing across his pupils. With a thought, countless arcs of lightning instantly materialized around him. They weren't white, however, but of 9 different colors instead. I've finally managed to fuse the 5 elements together. Right now, I still have yet to grasp the fundamental power of the Genesis world, so I can only summon the 5 elements lightning using the power of regulations. However, the regulations of the 5 elements and the regulation of lightning result in a resonance of 6 regulations, so the might that can be unleashed isn't simply a sum of their might. Just how powerful will it be? In any case, I'll worry about this later. I need to face a tribulation first. Ling Han exited the celestial guest residence, and dark clouds instantly appeared overhead, lightning flashing amid them. After 40 billion years of cultivation, Ling Han had naturally reached the peak stage of the 6th heaven. Borrowing the opportunity when successfully fusing the heavenly venerate technique together, Ling Han resolutely pushed open the gates to the 7th heaven. Chapter 2649, 2649 Miracle. 2649 Miracle. Even in this grand hall, heavenly tribulation still came and went as it pleased. However, this palace was indeed extraordinary. Theoretically speaking, heavenly tribulation should have formed outside the palace. The first bolt of lightning would then directly destroy the palace. It was because of this that people went to desolate locations to face heavenly tribulation. Here, however, heavenly tribulation directly appeared beneath the roof of the story. Dark clouds gathered, amid which lightning flashed. This was extremely strange. Perhaps heavenly tribulation knew that it couldn't damage this palace, so it directly appeared in this level? This wasn't impossible. This was because the might of heavenly tribulation also had its limits, the peak stage of the 9th heaven. However, heavenly venerates had exceeded this limit, so how could their constructions be damaged by heavenly tribulation? Why were heavenly venerates detested by heaven and earth? It was naturally because they had broken the rules of heaven and earth. At this moment, all kinds of thoughts rushed through Ling Han's mind. However, he immediately focused his attention on the tribulation. Crack. The first bolt of lightning slammed down, its might reaching the middle stage of the 9th heaven. Ling Han channeled the 5 elements lightning technique as he faced this strike, and he was unexpectedly able to manipulate the power of heavenly tribulation. Meanwhile, he also summoned his divine demon sword. Following his advance in cultivation, he naturally needed to elevate the level of the divine demon sword as well. In his mind, his celestial seed was undergoing its 7th transformation. Bolts of lightning continued to slam down. However, a large portion of their energy was absorbed by the divine demon sword and the 5 elements lightning technique. Even so, heavenly tribulation at the 9th heaven wasn't so easy to face. Ling Han was still riddled with wounds as he faced the remnant power from the bolts of lightning. In comparison, his indestructible celestial king physique, which had only just reached the 7th level, was truly a bit too weak. It seemed completely powerless against the destructive power of the 9th heaven. One day later, heavenly tribulation dissipated. Ling Han observed his own power, and a bitter smile involuntarily appeared on his face. This advance can be regarded as the advance where my power has increased the least. Because the energy of the dimension scroll had already been exhausted, his body art remained on the same level as before. His body art was the main source of his battle prowess, and it had already reached the pinnacle of the early stage of the 9th heaven. It was now approaching the middle stage. This time, only his power of regulations became more powerful. Even so, it had only been at the peak stage of the 8th heaven to begin with, and while it had now indeed advanced to the 9th heaven, it had only reached the early stage of the 9th heaven. Combined with his body art, Ling Han's battle prowess had now reached the middle stage of the 9th heaven. It could be said that his battle prowess had only improved by very little. This is also because the gulf between the 8th heaven and the 9th heaven is far too great. Combined with my body art, it's as if I haven't advanced at all. If he still had had a dimension scroll, his body art would have improved as well, so his battle prowess might have reached the peak stage of the 9th heaven. At the very least, it would have reached the late stage of the 9th heaven. However, Ling Han raised his hand, activating the 5 elements lightning technique. Gold, azure, black, red, and yellow intertwined together before there was a flash of white lightning that instantly transformed 9-colored divine lightning that pulsated in his palm. He could manipulate it in any form he wanted. Combining all 5 types of lightning together has led to a qualitative change. The might of a single strike can allow me to unleash destructive power at the peak stage of the 9th heaven. I've never come across such a powerful secret technique before. As expected of a heavenly venerate technique. However, with my current strength, I can only unleash 9 such strikes at most. After all, this is a heavenly venerate technique, and its might is far too extreme. If I can obtain all 9 scrolls of the 9 transformations divine scroll, and if I can channel each individually, I'll be able to maintain my explosive strength for longer. Shame, I still need 6 more scrolls. Instead of moping around here, I might as well test out Wally's models. I'll see if I can directly extract the 6 fundamental powers. Ling Han immediately stopped moping around, and started to mull over how he could resolve this problem. In any case, the Empress was still cultivating in seclusion, so he had much time on his hands. Ling Han started to channel Wally's model. He had initially used this cultivation technique to absorb power from the Dimension Scroll, but he was now using it on the entire heaven and earth. In fact, Ling Han had already attempted this before in the celestial realm. However, he hadn't succeeded at the time. However, Ling Han hadn't been a celestial king at that time either, and the celestial realm was more so a super low-level dimension. Meanwhile, this place was a transcendent dimension. The difference between the two was immense, so it was worth another try. Ling Han sat down cross-legged. He didn't enter the celestial guest residence this time, as the barrier of divine metal would affect his communication with heaven and earth. He sat as still as a boulder, not forgetting to also accelerate time. As for enemies finding him, he didn't worry about this at all. With his current strength, he could leave with composure and ease even if he came across a 9th heaven celestial king at the peak stage. In fact, if Ling Han suddenly unleashed the 5 elements lightning technique, it was possible that those at the peak stage of the 9th heaven might even die by his hands. 10 years, 100 years, 700 years. Ling Han was still unable to sense the fundamental power of the Genesis world. This was very normal. After all, only heavenly venerates could sense, grasp, and channel the 6 fundamental powers. Moreover, this was only heavenly venerates above the 1st tier. This was because 1st tier heavenly venerates could only use the unique power of each dimension. In some sense, they could be regarded as pseudo-heavenly venerates. Ling Han was only at the 7th heaven, yet he wanted to ascend the heavens with a single stride. However, Ling Han was no fool, and he naturally had his own reason for doing T. She had once absorbed void particle energy before, and he also had the model that had taken Wally countless years to create. Wally was more so the culmination of hundreds of epochs of knowledge. With this in mind, maybe, perhaps, Ling Han would have a sliver of a chance. Ling Han became increasingly calm and relaxed as his mind entered a state of wandering around the outside world. A minute particle suddenly rushed into his body. In terms of size, this particle was as small as could be. In terms of quality, however, what this particle possessed was utterly terrifying. This infinitesimally small particle possessed the power to obliterate heaven and earth. Pa! The particle suddenly burst apart, transforming into a storm of violent energy that coursed through Ling Han's body. Wah! Ling Han shuddered violently before vomiting a mouthful of blood. He felt as if 2/3 of his bones had been instantly broken. In fact, he had almost been killed. This is void particle energy. That particle had been none other than a void particle. He had absorbed a single one, yet the energy contained within it had been far too terrifying. The explosion of that particle that couldn't be seen with the naked eye had almost killed Ling Han. One had to realize that he was a 7th heaven celestial king whose battle prowess could reach the middle stage of the 9th heaven, yet he was almost unable to withstand this strike. However, Ling Han wasn't afraid. Instead, he was absolutely ecstatic. He had attracted a void particle. If he told others about this, they definitely wouldn't believe him. Even a first-tier heavenly venerate couldn't draw on the 6 fundamental powers, so how could Ling Han, a 7th heaven celestial king, do so? Cough, cough. Ling Han roared with laughter as blood continued to drip from his mouth. He hurriedly channeled the indestructible heaven's scroll to heal his wounds. He then guided the chaotic energy inside his body, using it to temper himself. Right now, he was still unable to directly absorb void particle energy. Instead, he could only use this method of tempering to strengthen his body art. Doing so was like taking a huge detour, but being able to manipulate this heavenly venerable tier power while at the celestial king tier was definitely worth it. In fact, it would be worth it even if things were 100 times more difficult. I'm still too weak, so I needed 1,000 years to attract a single void particle. The dimension scroll was much better. Not only could I extract its energy at any time, but its power was also gentle and not chaotic like this wild particle. Ling Han shook his head as he muttered this complaint. He then started to cultivate again. Chapter 2650, 2650 gathered together. 2650 gathered together. Without the dimension scroll, directly absorbing the fundamental power of the Genesis world was far too difficult. As freakish as Ling Han was, and even though he had already come across void particle energy before, it still took him upwards 1,000 years to finally attract a single void particle. However, this was only the beginning of his pain. The explosion of chaotic energy left him severely wounded. Ling Han continued to cycle through this process. He would attract a void particle with much difficulty, and then he would suffer severe wounds after withstanding its chaotic explosion. He would then continue to heal his wounds as he extracted the particle's energy to temper his physique. Without a doubt, this was an agonizing process. However, Ling Han could indeed feel his body art improving. Even though this was a slow process, one that couldn't compare to extracting energy from the dimension scroll, it was still like opening a treasure chamber. A dimension scroll could be exhausted, yet as long as the Genesis world wasn't destroyed, fundamental power would never be exhausted. Thus, this second method could be used forever. What was the most important? Ling Han could already sense and absorb void particle energy. This signified that as long as he could become a first-tier heavenly venerate, he was guaranteed to eventually become a second-tier heavenly venerate. After another 7 million years, the Empress also concluded her cultivation. She had also mastered the 5 elements lightning technique, and she had more so reached the barrier to the 7th heaven. The Empress faced her tribulation. This was a difficult process as the higher one's cultivation level, the more brutal heavenly tribulation would become. This was especially the case for Supreme Monarch stars who had to experience heavenly tribulation that was far superior to their cultivation level. Fortunately, relying on her mastery of the 5 elements lightning, she was able to reduce the threat that the bolts of lightning posed to her. After successfully overcoming her tribulation, the Empress entered the celestial guest residence to stabilize her cultivation. Meanwhile, Ling Han had already completed this process long ago. He stood up and strode forward. This palace very likely held an ultimate secret, and this was something that piqued his interest. However, just as he stood up, he heard footsteps approaching from behind him. He turned around, and he involuntarily raised a brow. Yingxiong. Miao Hua. The two of them had actually entered the palace together. According to the intentions of the primordial ancient heavenly venerate, only those who had mastered the 4 previous lightning techniques could pass the wall of lightning and enter this area. Thus, these two had most likely obtained all 4 lightning technique inheritances as well. After all, they were all supreme monarch stars, so it was only natural that they possessed such powerful comprehension ability. However, it was rumored that all of the 9th heaven celestial kings were in this place, so how had they passed the wall of lightning? Perhaps those at the 9th heaven could pass without obstruction? Many questions flashed through Ling Han's mind. However, killing intent spread across his face as he said, "You two have come to seek death?" "Wrong. We've come to kill you," Yingxiong said coldly, directly retrieving his celestial spear. His luck wasn't as good as Ling Han's, and it had taken him an extremely long time to find and obtain all 4 of the lightning technique inheritances. Only then could he come to this final destination. Coincidentally, he had come across Miao Hua during this process. Indeed, he truly hadn't sought out Miao Hua on purpose. "We'll settle this today," Ling Han said as he drew his divine demon sword. If they left the Celestial King graveyard, the heavenly venerates of the Martial Academy would definitely prevent them from killing each other. Thus, it was necessary to settle their differences here. "Killing you will be as easy as killing a chicken," Miao Hua said in contempt. He also retrieved a celestial staff. Boom! His 8th heaven aura was as vast as the sea. Miao Hua had already advanced to the 8th heaven tens of millions of years ago, so after so many years, he had already reached the late stage of the 8th heaven. His battle prowess had more so soared to the late stage of the 9th heaven. The higher one's cultivation level, the weaker their ability to surpass tiers. Only supreme monarch stars could remain so impressive. Boom! Yingxiong also unleashed his own aura. He was also at the late stage of the 8th heaven. Ling Han remained unfazed as he held his divine demon sword flat. He extended his left hand and made a hooking motion with his fingers. "Come at me." Arrogant, the 2 supreme prodigies said with a cold chuckle. They then attacked in unison. One thrust with his spear, while the other swept with his staff. They didn't need to cooperate. At their level, any casual attack would possess a high level of coordination. Ling Han swung his sword and met their attacks. Wang! His divine demon sword caught both their spear and staff. A colossal power surged over, instantly pushing his arm back. Only when his arm was about to hit his face did it finally stop. He roared loudly as he unleashed his body art. Pung! The spear and staff were both pushed back. 7 ribbons of iridescent light materialized around him, making him appear like a deity. 7th heaven. Yingxiong and Miao Hua exclaimed in shock. Yingxiong was especially astonished. During his previous battle with Ling Han had only just advanced to the 6th heaven. Now, however, he was already at the 7th heaven. After so many years, Yingxiong had only advanced from the early stage of the 8th heaven to the late stage. He hadn't even reached the peak stage. If he wanted to advance to the 9th heaven, that would more so require at least 50 million years. That would already be extremely quick, astonishingly quick. Compared to Ling Han, however, was his cultivation speed not as slow as a snail? If this trend continued, when Yingxiong advanced to the 9th heaven, Ling Han would also be about to advance to this level. Yingxiong looked at Miao Hua and said, "We can't hold back. We definitely have to kill him today." "Agreed," Miao Hua said with a nod. He glared at Ling Han as he raised the staff in his hands. Wang, wang, wang. Symbols lit up on the staff. Heaven-facing staff, Celestial King's bow. He unleashed an attack. Boom! The celestial staff slammed down. With his 9th heaven battle prowess, he was able to unleash the full might of the divine metal. As his staff swung, a sheet of dazzling gold appeared around it. At the same time, he also unleashed a spiritual attack. Die. He was the first to attack. Meanwhile, Yingxiong stood to the side, waiting for Ling Han to expose a weakness. At that time, he would deliver the killing blow and end Ling Han's life. The spiritual attack ignored all sense of distance as it arrived, immediately causing Ling Han to grasp his head in pain. Haha! Miao Hua roared with laughter. He was extremely confident in his spiritual attack. As long as his spiritual attack wasn't cancelled out by his opponents, it could easily cause his foe to suffer gripping pain in their mind, causing them to become sluggish. If his opponent were weaker, his spiritual attack could directly shatter their mind and end their life. Ling Han had already been struck. When Miao Hua's staff landed, Miao Hua would seize this opportunity to turn Ling Han into a pancake. As simple as that? Confusion spread across Yingxiong's face. He had battled with Ling Han before, with the two of them being evenly matched. However, Ling Han's celestial tool was forged from devouring metal, which had forced him to retreat and flee. Was Ling Han this weak? Be careful of trickery, he hurriedly warned. Miao Hua scoffed in disdain. Ling Han had already been struck by his spiritual attack, so even if he were purposefully showing a weakness, this would now be a genuine weakness. He would send Ling Han on his way. His staff slammed down. Ling Han suddenly raised his head, with a bolt of 9-colored lightning crackling in his left hand as he swung it toward the staff. Striking a celestial tool with your bare hand? Who do you think you are? You're seeking death. Miao Hua snickered upon seeing this, and his staff continued to slam down. Even if Ling Han were trying to trick him, this would still be a case of his genius leading to his own demise. Wang! Ling Han's hand had already caught the celestial staff. Pa! With the destructive power of a celestial tool and the fearsome might of the ninth heaven, Ling Han's palm was obliterated in an instant. His seventh heaven physique was nowhere near powerful enough. However, Miao Hua also shuddered involuntarily. This was because a bolt of devastating lightning had surged through the celestial staff and entered his body. Not only did this cause him to become numb, but his bones and internal organs were also blasted into smithereens by the lightning in an instant. It was also at this moment that Ling Han slashed down with his sword. He was expressionless, as if it weren't his hand that had been shattered just then. His gaze was harrowingly cold. Stop! Yingxiong roared as he hurriedly launched an attack, attempting to block Ling Han. However, was this not too late? Pooh! The divine demon sword directly stabbed into Miao Hua's Hyd. Chapter 2651, 2651 Uncanny Sight. 2651 Uncanny Sight. Miao Hua dazedly stared at Ling Han. He was completely unable to accept this result. Elites and freaks like them had already reached the peak of cultivation, yet Ling Han had actually employed such a technique? He had chosen to exchange a wound for a wound? No, Ling Han had indeed been wounded. However, Miao Hua had been killed. Miao Hua was filled with puzzlement. Ling Han had clearly been struck by his spiritual attack, so how had he remained unaffected? Moreover, his hand had clearly been shattered, so how had he remained so calm? Moreover, Ling Han's attack had directly obliterated Miao Hua's bones and internal organs, and caused Miao Hua to instantly become sluggish. It was because of this that he had been unable to dodge Ling Han's sword. Why? Why? He died in confusion. At this moment, Yingxiong's attack finally arrived, with his spear stabbing at Ling Han. Ling Han retreated and unleashed his body art. Pung! He immediately accelerated, dodging the spear by mere millimeters. Ling Han looked at Miao Hua and said, "If you knew about what I've experienced these years, you wouldn't be surprised by my resilience and endurance. Moreover, I've already mastered the 5 elements lightning technique, and this is a heavenly venerate technique, so it's only natural that you weren't able to withstand it." During the past 5 million years, Ling Han's body would erupt once every 1,000 years. Thus, compared to this pain, what did a shattered hand matter? Similarly, after enduring such pain over and over again, what effects could a spiritual attack still have on him? After enduring such attacks enough times, one would naturally develop immunity to them. However, Miao Hua was still unable to accept this. He slowly exhaled. This was his remnant resentment and vexation. His head then flopped to the side, signifying his demise. His mind had been obliterated, and this was something that even ninth heaven celestial kings couldn't survive. Ling Han casually retrieved Miao Hua's spatial celestial tool. He then channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, immediately starting to heal his broken hand. However, this was an extremely slow process. After all, this wound had been caused by a celestial tool, so a fearsome destructive power continued to rip through his hand, preventing it from healing. Yingxiong took a deep breath, saying, "Who would have thought that you've already become this powerful?" In the blink of an eye, Ling Han had already caught up to Yingxiong. Miao Hua, someone equally as powerful as him, had more so been killed. This wasn't because Miao Hua was weak. Instead, it was because Ling Han had been far too brutal. He had opted to exchange a wound for a wound, a life for a life. Miao Hua hadn't been prepared for such ferocity. You're unafraid of spiritual attacks, and you've more so mastered a complete heavenly venerate technique. I've underestimated you, Yingxiong said. However, he was unafraid. He gripped his celestial spear tightly, and his fighting spirit soared into the sky. Ling Han smiled faintly. In fact, he hadn't needed to be so brutal. However, even if his battle prowess could suppress that of Yingxiong and Miao Hua, if they were intent on fleeing, whom would he pursue? No matter whom Ling Han pursued, the other would be able to escape. If Ling Han wanted to kill them in the future, that would be incredibly difficult. Thus, Ling Han had decided to take a gamble. Risking a severe wound, he resolutely killed Miao Hua. Now, even if Yingxiong wanted to flee, Ling Han wouldn't have to worry. He was confident that he could kill the former no matter what corner of the world the other party fled to. Moreover, with the two of them cooperating, Ling Han might not have been their match. This was to say nothing of killing them. Since that's the case, why don't you kneel down and accept death? Ling Han said calmly. I'm no Miao Hua. Yingxiong scoffed. I'm not as conceited as him. Then come battle, Ling Han said as he leaped forward. Pung! He unleashed an astounding power, instantly arriving before Yingxiong and thrusting his sword. Ding! Yingxiong raised his spear to block Ling Han's attack. Haha! Just as I expected. Even though you've advanced to the seventh heaven, the rise of your battle prowess is lagging far behind this level, Yingxiong said with laughter. Otherwise, he would have fled long ago. Ling Han's flurry of slashes was like a downpour of rain. During the past 5 million years, his body art had indeed improved. However, this improvement hadn't been significant. After all, he had been cultivating with no external help, so how could he soar into the skies in a single bound? Ling Han appeared indifferent at this moment, merely exchanging strikes with Yingxiong. He was waiting for his left hand to recover so he could summon the 5 elements lightning technique again. At that time, Yingxiong would know the meaning of regret. Being a spectator and being the actual person involved were completely different experiences. A complete heavenly venerate technique was far too terrifying. Ding, ding, ding. The two of them were locked in an intense battle. Even though Yingxiong's words were tough, after failing to suppress Ling Han after several attempts, he started to show signs of wanting to leave. This was because Ling Han wielded the divine demon sword, a celestial tool that could suppress his spear. If they continued to battle, he would be at a huge disadvantage. Without the slightest hesitation, he immediately turned around to leave. Ling Han gave chase. This time was different from last time. He had already obtained the inheritance of the 5 elements lightning technique, so there was no reason for him to stay. One fled, and one pursued. Yingxiong's goal was very clear. He was charging toward the uppermost level of the palace, and searching for the rumored passageway that led out of the Celestial King graveyard. Even though Yingxiong had failed to kill Ling Han, he had still soared from the early stage of the 7th heaven to the late stage of the 8th heaven in just 100 million years. Was this improvement not impressive enough? This was already enough. Thus, he decided to leave the Celestial King graveyard first. In any case, he could re-enter in the future to obtain the final inheritance of the 5 elements lightning technique. Someone like him naturally knew when to fight for something and when to retreat. He understood how to weigh things up. Ling Han pursued him relentlessly, with his divine demon sword slashing without mercy. He definitely wouldn't allow Yingxiong to escape. They continued upward, quickly arriving on the 18th floor. They then entered the 20th floor, the 30th floor. When they arrived at the 33rd floor, they were both given a start, stopping in their tracks. This was because this floor wasn't empty anymore. Instead, there were numerous giant eggs on the floor, with each being 2 persons tall. Their girth was also wider than what 2 people could embrace. They were ink black in color, and they were also surrounded by wisps of rising black air. This was an uncanny scene. Row after row, column after column, the eggs were dense and boundless. According to rumors, there was an ultimate inheritance hidden here, and there was also a passageway to leave the Celestial King graveyard. What in the world was this, then? Yingxiong glanced at Ling Han before dashing forward again. Meanwhile, Ling Han looked at his right hand. A new hand had already grown from his wrist, and the final finger had also finished growing. This signified that he had completely recovered from Miao Hua's strike. Ling Han accumulated some power before bending his knees and lunging forward. At the same time, he also activated the regulations of time and the regulations of space. With his wound healed, he no longer had anything to fear, so he unleashed his full strength. Even though Yingxiong wasn't facing Ling Han, his divine sense was naturally aware of his surroundings. Thus, he could clearly see Ling Han catching up to him at an incredible speed. At the same time, Ling Han's sword pierced at his back. If Yingxiong didn't block this strike, he would be seeking death. Ding! He turned around and swung his spear, catching the divine demon's sword and pushing its tip aside. Boom! Just how terrifying was the battle prowess of these 2 supreme prodigies. Their exchange instantly unleashed a ferocious shock wave into the surroundings. The surrounding eggs bore the brunt of this shock wave. Crack, crack, crack. They all split apart. However, in an uncanny sight, only the outer layer of the eggs crumbled. The black mist dissipated, revealing an almost transparent inner shell. Ling Han had initially wanted to launch another strike. However, upon seeing the matter in the eggs, he involuntarily stopped. Inside these eggs were people. Each egg held a person, and it was as if these people were in a deep slumber. Their arms were wrapped around their knees, and they were curled up like a ball. They were completely naked, yet they were astoundingly surrounded by 9 ribbons of iridescent light. 9th Heaven Celestial Kings. Heavens. Each egg held a 9th Heaven Celestial King. It was as if they were dormant and undergoing some kind of transformation. Ling Han finally understood why he hadn't come across any 9th Heaven Celestial King. However, knowing this was one thing. Right now, he was even more puzzled. What the fuck was happening here? Chapter 2652, 2652 Hidden Mastermind. 2652 Hidden Mastermind. Yingxiong also stopped in his tracks. This was completely different from the rumors. That being the case, it was very likely that there was no ultimate inheritance, nor was there any passageway to leave the Celestial King graveyard. Instead, this was more like the ultimate resting place for Celestial Kings. More frighteningly, just how many 9th Heaven Celestial Kings were in this place? If they attacked in unison, even first-tier heavenly venerates would have to step aside and retreat. Thus, how were they all captured? By the looks of them, they clearly hadn't been wounded. That being the case, who possessed such astounding might. Not only had they captured so many ninth heaven celestial kings, but they had even done so with ease, not needing to injure these celestial kings at all. Even first-tier heavenly venerates couldn't do this, right? Ling Han had no spare time to chase Yingxiong. Instead, he gripped his sword and focused his mind to the extreme, ready to face any sudden change. Yingxiong's reaction was identical. If they continued to battle, they would be nothing more than utter fools. Sigh. A long sigh echoed through the large hall, making it impossible to determine where it had come from. Why be so pretentious? Show yourself. Ling Han roared. I'm not being pretentious, the voice said. A person in black immediately walked out from behind a pillar. Their entire body was hidden by a black cloak, one that even the divine senses of celestial kings couldn't see through. Desolate moon. Ling Han said in a solemn voice. Only a single person would dress like this. The person in black chuckled, saying, Indeed, I am Desolate Moon. His voice was flowy, and it was hard to determine whether they were male or female. Yingxiong pointed at the giant eggs, and asked, What's going on here? Oh. Why should I tell you? Desolate Moon replied calmly. It looks like everything is under your control, so why don't you share this information with us? If there's no one to share the joy of victory with, won't that greatly reduce your sense of achievement? Ling Han said with a smile. With your own abilities, you were able to trick all of the celestial kings in the Celestial King graveyard. This is a huge achievement, no? Ha ha ha. Desolate Moon laughed heartily, saying, That's right, I do indeed feel very smug. However, I've always been a cautious person. What if you two manage to escape after learning my secret? Won't that ruin my grand plans? This person was truly careful. Then I'll force you to speak. Yingxiong roared as he charged forward. Swoosh. His spear thrust forth. Desolate Moon didn't dodge, nor did he show any signs of blocking the strike. However, just as Yingxiong's attack was about to strike him, the spear suddenly stopped, unable to advance another inch. An expression of struggle spread across Yingxiong's face. In fact, sweat started to drip down his forehead. However, his spear was still unable to advance. Ling Han felt deep apprehension in his heart. Desolate Moon's abilities were far too terrifying. Without lifting a single finger, he defeated Yingxiong, a supreme monarch star with a battle prowess at the late stage of the ninth heaven. Was he perhaps a pseudo-heavenly venerate? Desolate Moon extended a hand. He wasn't quick, and it was as if he were casually raising his hands. He then grabbed the spear and pushed it back slowly, causing the blade of the spear to immediately point away. How strange. Why are you completely defenseless before me? He looked at Yingxiong before continuing. The reason for this is very simple. That's because something within you is being controlled by me. The more powerful you are because of this matter, the more you'll be controlled by me. A thought suddenly occurred to Ling Han, and he exclaimed, That black energy. He finally understood how so many ninth heaven celestial kings had been captured by Desolate Moon without suffering any wounds. This was because they all had black energy within them. And as long as they had black energy within them, they would be controlled by Desolate Moon. However, controlling them was one matter. Why did he need to place so many celestial kings in such a strange manner? What in the world was he trying to do? Indeed. You're very smart. However, it's already too late. Desolate Moon raised his arm at Ling Han as if he wanted to control him as well. However, he immediately faltered. If he weren't wearing the cloak, perhaps the astonishment on his face would be evident. Fuck. Why can't he be controlled? In his eyes, all of the celestial kings were his pawns. What did it matter that they were powerful ninth heaven celestial kings? Unable to contain their cardinal sin of greed, they were destined to fall under his control. Now, however, someone had actually managed to escape his control. He was naturally astounded. You're actually unaffected? Desolate Moon said coldly. He had already regained his composure. What did it matter that Ling Han couldn't be controlled? He was only a seventh heaven celestial king. Ling Han smiled and said, "Not everything can always be under your control, right? Humph. You think you still have the chance to escape after entering this place?" Desolate Moon swept his hand over Xiao Yingxiong's head before roaring with laughter, and saying, "Who would have thought that this brat detested you so much? Very well. I'll give you the opportunity to exact revenge." He tapped a finger on Xiao Yingxiong's forehead, causing countless dazzling particles to instantly funnel into his body. Ling Han raised a brow. The complete 9 transformations divine scroll? He had practiced 3 scrolls, so he was extremely sensitive to this. Correct. Desolate Moon said with pride. Sure enough, everything was planned by you all along. However, I still don't understand. What's the point? Ling Han said. If you allow this black energy to enter your body, I can satisfy your curiosity, Desolate Moon replied as he raised his right hand. Boom! A wisp of black energy immediately materialized in the air, swirling around his hand. This can bestow you with a boundless battle prowess. Open your arms and embrace it. Accept this paramount power. It shall give you a new life. Ling Han scoffed and said, "Load of sh*t." Desolate Moon didn't speak to him anymore, instead waving a hand, and saying, "Go on, go over and suppress him. However, make sure not to kill him. This person is destined to become a heavenly venerate, so he'll be an incredibly important piece." These words were targeted at Xiao Yingxiong. The latter had still been in a state of stupefaction just then, but his eyes immediately moved upon hearing this. He then turned around to face Ling Han. Another battle? Ling Han brandished his sword. He was naturally unafraid of Xiao Yingxiong. However, Xiao Yingxiong was a puppet now, so this made him feel like he had to win. Die! Xiao Yingxiong roared, raising his spear and charging forward. His celestial king power radiated, and his battle prowess soared. Ding! The two of them exchanged a blow, and Ling Han was involuntarily astonished. This was because Xiao Yingxiong's strength had surprisingly increased by a notch. This was because of the 9 transformations divine scroll. In such a short period of time, Xiao Yingxiong had already grasped the 4th scroll of the 9 transformations divine scroll, allowing his battle prowess to increase a notch. Even though this wasn't shocking, it was still impressive nonetheless. They continued to do battle. Even though Xiao Yingxiong was being controlled by someone else, his fighting spirit and capabilities remained completely unaffected. His strength was fully unleashed. In terms of battle prowess alone, he was already no match for Ling Han. He was at a slight disadvantage. Even so, he was completely able to resist and hold on. After 15 minutes, Xiao Yingxiong's battle prowess suddenly increased by another notch. He had grasped the 5th scroll of the 9 transformations divine scroll. This was simply incredible. How was it possible to comprehend a heavenly venerate technique so quickly? Ling Han refused to believe that Xiao Yingxiong possessed such a powerful comprehension ability. As such, there was only a single explanation for this: Desolate Moon. More precisely, this was related to the black energy within Xiao Yingxiong. Ling Han couldn't help but feel astonished. If Desolate Moon trained all of the celestial kings here to the 9th heaven and then controlled them to charge out, just how devastating would their destructive power be? What in the world was this person planning? Die! 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 Xiao Yingxiong's battle prowess continued to increase. Chapter 2653, 2653 Desolate Moon's True Identity. 2653 Desolate Moon's True Identity. Ah! Xiao Yingxiong roared in rage, with all of his veins bulging and his black hair billowing into the sky. He could already channel the complete 9 transformations divine scroll, which caused his battle prowess to become petrifying. However, how could a complete heavenly venerate technique be used for an extended period of time? Even as powerful as the Imperial Void Celestial King was, he could only activate the Dragon Fish technique for a limited amount of time. Meanwhile, Yingxiong wasn't even a Ninth Heaven Celestial King, so he naturally couldn't activate the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll for very long. Moreover, it took a huge toll on his body. Pa. Some of his veins directly exploded, drenching him in blood. However, this blood transformed into numerous symbols that aided him, causing his battle prowess to increase even further. Boom! His celestial spear was like a divine dragon as its murderous aura soared into the sky. At this moment, Yingxiong was unbelievably powerful, turning the tables and suppressing Ling Han instead. This was a complete heavenly venerate technique, so unless Ling Han also activated a complete heavenly venerate technique, how could he possibly rival it? Ling Han's gaze was intense as he mulled over whether he should activate the 5 elements lightning technique. However, if he used it against Yingxiong, how would he deal with Desolate Moon afterward? Even though Desolate Moon hadn't revealed his power yet, Ling Han was certain that the former was incredibly powerful. Moreover, if Desolate Moon woke all of the 9th Heaven Celestial Kings here, Ling Han would have no option but to flee. Only with the 5 elements lightning technique would he be confident that he could carve out a bloody path. However, Yingxiong wouldn't consider so much. Right now, there was a black gleam expanding in his eyes. Eventually, it filled his entire eyes. It was as if he had lost his mind and become nothing more than a tool of slaughter. Sure enough, this black energy looked like it could increase one's battle prowess, but it was instead a poisonous pill. Right now, Yingxiong was tasting the bitter results. At this moment, was Yingxiong still himself? Pa. Yingxiong's skin continued to crack and explode. Even so, he continued to channel the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll. However, heavenly venerate techniques couldn't be channeled forever, or else one would definitely have to pay a huge price. Right now, Yingxiong was using a self-harming method to maintain the circulation of this heavenly venerate technique. What he received in return was overwhelming power. Ling Han had no option but to channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll. He was still reluctant to use the 5 elements lightning technique. Boom! 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 His body was covered in golden symbols, which caused his defenses to improve exponentially, and allowed him to face Yingxiong's attacks without being injured. However, Ling Han could only channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll for around 2 hours. What would he do after this? Desolate Moon laughed as he watched on. He was like a passerby enjoying the show. Pa! One of Yingxiong's fingers directly exploded into pieces. However, his blood transformed, allowing him to continue channeling the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll. At the same time, a wisp of black energy rose from his severed finger, replacing it and making it seem as if the finger had never disappeared in the first place. Pa! Before long, another finger burst apart, and was replaced by another wisp of black energy. Then the third, the fourth. When all 10 of his fingers disappeared, his toes started to explode as well. Then it was his other bones. With each bone that exploded, a wisp of black energy would replace it. This allowed him to maintain human form. It also allowed him to continue channeling the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll. 2 hours quickly passed, and Ling Han was unable to channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll any longer. The golden symbols on his body started to flash and dim. Meanwhile, apart from the head, Yingxiong's entire body had already been replaced with wisps of black energy. Desolate Moon sighed, saying, "If you continue, you'll truly become a cripple. Forget about it. Move aside." He finished speaking, yet Yingxiong didn't obey his command. Instead, he continued to battle. Huh? Desolate Moon was slightly astonished. Even he found this strange. Boom! Yingxiong suddenly unleashed a powerful aura, furiously turning his spear around and thrusting it at Desolate Moon. This clearly caught Desolate Moon by surprise, and he faltered for a moment before reacting. However, Could one falter during a battle between celestial kings? Pooh! The spear pierced through his cloak and exited through the other end. Don't even dream of controlling me, Yingxiong. Yingxiong bellowed in rage. The black in his eyes dissipated as he said this. Ling Han was also given a start. He hadn't imagined that Yingxiong would regain his consciousness at the last moment, also giving Desolate Moon a fatal blow. It had to be said that Yingxiong was indeed a supreme monarch star. He was indeed a big shot from the world's paramount martial academy. Damn it! Desolate Moon roared in rage. Pung! He waved a hand and struck Yingxiong's chest. Pung! Yingxiong immediately exploded. Right now, apart from his head, his entire body was formed from black energy. Meanwhile, this black energy was controlled by Desolate Moon, so Desolate Moon was naturally able to shatter it with ease. Yingxiong wore an expression of puzzlement. After being struck by his spear, not only had this person not died, but even their battle prowess was completely unaffected? Whoosh! He immediately reacted, swinging upward with his spear and instantly knocking back Desolate Moon's cloak. Ha! His expression was as if he had seen a ghost. Ling Han also wore an identical expression. This was because Desolate Moon's appearance was far too terrifying. Was this really a human? Even though he had a nose and eyes, his face was covered in black tentacles. These tentacles weren't physical matter, but instead were formed with the black energy. Pung! Yingxiong was sent flying, with the black energy immediately receding. All that remained was his lone head. Damn it, you actually exposed my true appearance. Desolate Moon shouted in incandescent rage. The black tentacles on his face billowed, appearing sinister yet repulsive. Yingxiong's head hovered in the air. At his level, as long as his mind wasn't obliterated, he wouldn't be killed. Thus, he could still activate some techniques. He was astounded as he gazed at Desolate Moon, and he exclaimed, "You're Chang Huayan." Desolate Moon looked at Yingxiong, and said in a baleful voice, "Who knew that a junior would actually recognize me? Didn't you die in the realm battlefield long ago?" Yingxiong asked, unable to conceal his astonishment. After all, anyone would feel torrential waves in their mind after seeing a person of the legends who was already rumored to be dead. Moreover, this person had now become so strange in appearance. Indeed, the Chang Huayan of the past has already died in the realm battlefield. Now, I am Desolate Moon. Desolate Moon said. Killing intent flooded his face. This was an expression of disdain and disgust for everyone in the world. According to rumors, you only fell into the trap because you were set up by your fellow sect members, Yingxiong murmured. His voice became softer and softer. Ling Han took over, saying, "You didn't die, but you instead surrendered to hysteria." He finally understood why this black energy gave him a sense of familiarity. This was because they were far too similar to Hysteria's tentacles. Chang Huayan had fallen into Hysteria's trap, yet Hysteria hadn't killed him. Instead, Hysteria had reformed Chang Huayan and taken advantage of his fury with being betrayed to successfully take him in as a subordinate. Now, Chang Huayan had entered the Celestial King graveyard with a mission. However, what was this mission? Ling Han looked at the giant eggs in the surroundings, each of which held a ninth heaven Celestial King who was enveloped in black energy. In other words, they were all being affected and controlled by Hysteria. Once they left the Celestial King graveyard, just how much chaos and destruction would they cause? The strength of a dimension was in large part determined by the population that it housed. It wasn't limited to the number of top-notch elites. After massacring a dimension, these Celestial Kings would definitely weaken the overall strength of the Flaming Frost realm by a significant amount. At that time, Hysteria would naturally draw another step closer to engulfing this entire dimension. Gasp! Yingxiong also realized this, with his face becoming as white as a sheet. This was even though only his head remained. Chapter 2654, 2654 True Hero. 2654 True Hero. Desolate Moon's eyes roved over Ling Han and Yingxiong. Black chi was continuously rising from his face, and turning into snake-like forms, but at the same time, it seemed like tentacles as well, which was extremely disgusting. He revealed a grin. I really cannot underestimate your intelligence, to have more or less reconstructed the truth with just a few clues. That's right. In the past, I was betrayed and besieged, and was ultimately swept away by Lord Hysteria's troops. Everyone thought that I was dead. But I simply did not die. It was Lord Hysteria that gave me a new life, and bestowed on me an even wider world. You think that joining Lord Hysteria is a humiliation, a mistake, right? You are wrong. Lord Hysteria is destined to unite all the dimensions and accommodate all worlds. When we are living in the world Lord Hysteria creates, we will have truly surpassed the heaven and earth and transcended heaven and earth. Ling Han scoffed, you are obviously just a lackey, yet speak so boldly and confidently. I really don't know how you can be so shameless. Youth, you are now arrogant and overbearing, yet do not know it is the human heart that is the darkest. Desolate Moon humphed, flames of fury flickering in his eyes. When these people are done, I will take them to that person who set me up, and have an accounting of old debts. What are your plans for these celestial kings? Ling Han asked grimly. There was no need for Desolate Moon to even answer. However, he thought for a while. Ling Han was just a bird trapped in a cage, so what need was there to be concerned about him? Furthermore, Desolate Moon had accomplished such a mighty feat, if he did not share it with someone, he would indeed not feel satisfied. In any case, the other party had already deduced so much, so it would be fine for them to know some more information. Desolate Moon smiled, and said, this so-called black chi is the spirit shards of Lord Hysteria. To Lord Hysteria, this is basically scraps, but for celestial kings like us, it can help us transform and take that most crucial step. A look of mania crossed his face. Just think, thousands upon thousands of pseudo-heavenly venerates appearing, just what a grand sight would that be? Dimensional power was endless, and a heavenly venerate could be easily produced through the use of a dimension scroll, so why were there so few heavenly venerates? That was because heaven and earth was operating by its own rules. Heavenly venerable tier power was definitely not allowed to appear. But Hysteria was different. It was a dimension, but at the same time, it itself was a being that had its own thoughts. There was absolutely no need for it to be concerned with any rules, because it could create as many heavenly venerates as it desired. In fact, it was stretching out its hand in this direction. In Hysteria's world, creating a heavenly venerate was only the matter of a single thought, but it was not so simple in other dimensions. One would need the help of others, and also need a very, very long time to attain the heavenly venerable tier. Even pseudo-heavenly venerates could not possibly break out of the celestial king graveyard, Ling Han stated evenly, but these words were a foreshadowing of things to come. True enough, Desolate Moon continued, this ancient tomb is the large tomb that the primordial ancient heavenly venerate laid out when he was alive, burying those subordinates that had followed him all the way. Afterwards, he advanced to the realm battlefield to participate in the resistance against Lord Hysteria, and he was naturally destroyed and turned into nothing. However, Desolate Moon paused for a while, and then continued, Lord Hysteria has obtained all the memories that belong to the primordial ancient heavenly venerate, and thus spent a great amount of effort and energy to forcefully create a passageway here that is connected directly to the outside of this realm. Hence, just put away all those worries of yours. Brat, don't have any unrealistic delusions. If you absorb the black chi voluntarily, you can suffer a little less. Otherwise, I would be very pleased to torture a prodigy. Ling Han had asked this question merely to find out if there was any way to leave here. As expected, since Desolate Moon had laid out such a grand conspiracy, he had already organized and planned out for all the minor details. Once these ninth heaven celestial kings broke through to become pseudo-heavenly venerates, Desolate Moon would take these people and leave. Whether they would be moving separately or attacking in unison, this force would be extremely terrifying. Most importantly, the realm battlefield was already under a great strain, so how many heavenly venerates could be dispatched from the front lines to deal with this big problem? First-tier heavenly venerates weren't enough at all. One would not be able to deal with even so many ninth heaven celestial kings, and once these people set foot in the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, probably even a second-tier heavenly venerate would not be enough either. Sigh, seeing how your gaze wanders, you clearly are unwilling to accept my suggestion. Desolate Moon shook his head, and then said, Yingxiong, go and take down this traitorous subject. Yingxiong had a conflicted expression, but his eyes were very soon covered completely by the black light again. Boom! Countless streaks of black chi cascaded down from his severed neck, and reformed his torso. Die! Brandishing the divine spear, Yingxiong charged towards Ling Han in attack. Desolate Moon sighed. If Ling Han and Yingxiong had come just a little earlier, he could have summoned some ninth heaven celestial kings to help him, but now was the very most crucial moment when these celestial kings were attempting to break through to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. If they were interrupted, there would be no way to establish communication with Hysteria, who was afar, again. They naturally could not possibly make another attempt to break through to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. However, even if Yingxiong could not deal with Ling Han, if Desolate Moon himself was added into the equation, would it still not be enough? Ding, 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 ding. Ling Han and Yingxiong battled endlessly. The two of them fought from east to west, from south to north. The shock waves of their clashes reverberated, shattering the outer shell of the gigantic eggs inside the palace into smithereens. However, the inside of the eggs was completely undamaged. The celestial king inside could not be affected at all. Desolate Moon frowned, a strange feeling rising up in his heart. Just at this moment, Yingxiong released a roar of fury. Boom! A golden light rose from the top of his head, instantly dispersing the black chi that had formed his body. No! Desolate Moon exclaimed in shock. This indicated that Yingxiong had escaped his control. How was this possible? Once the black chi entered the body, one would be affected by the black chi. These were spirit shards of Hysteria, and even if it was just a tiny bit, along with being suppressed by this dimension, it was still extremely easy to influence a ninth heaven celestial king. Even a ninth heaven celestial king could not resolve this, what more a mere eighth heaven celestial king. But not only had Yingxiong resolved it, he had accomplished it twice at that. Was this the willpower of a supreme monarch star? Go, I'll hold him back. You must bring the information back to the Martial Academy, or I will not spare you even if I die. Yingxiong roared loudly, suddenly grabbing out at his forehead. A sphere of glowing white light appeared in his hand, and he tossed it over at Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out a hand and grabbed it. This sphere of light was the complete version of the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll. Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. Though Yingxiong had always been on opposing sides with him, scrambling his brains to try and kill him, at the most crucial moment, he had done something that only a true hero would do. When they had previously been fighting, Yingxiong had been communicating with him through divine sense, and said that he still had a sliver of himself that was conscious. He would deliberately take the fight with Ling Han to the far corner of the palace, and create a chance for Ling Han to escape. That was because once Desolate Moon's plan succeeded, tens of thousands of pseudo-heavenly venerates would enter into the flaming frost realm. The damage caused by that would be too terrifying. Faced with this conflict of principles, Yingxiong suppressed his personal grudges, and was wise, generous, and heroic just this once. He knew that death was fated for him, so he also took out the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll, which he threw over to Ling Han. He was not Desolate Moon, so he had no way to make it so Ling Han would completely grasp this divine scroll in a single instant. He could only pass on his own memories to Ling Han so that the latter could study them slowly. Ling Han's expression was solemn. Yingxiong, from this moment onwards, all our personal debts and grudges are resolved. Allow me to call you Brother Xiao. Don't speak in such a sentimental manner. I told you to scram because no one can humiliate me, Yingxiong. Yingxiong turned his head. Golden energy manifested his body once again. His hand gripped onto the divine spear, emanating a heroism of someone that would only forge onwards, with no return. Even if there are millions standing in my way, I will still charge bravely forwards. Chapter 2655, 2655 Leaving. 2655 Leaving. Take them down. Desolate Moon pointed a finger at Ling Han and Yingxiong, flustered and exasperated. He could no longer care for anything else. Pa. Instantly, 10 egg-like structures that could not be destroyed suddenly broke open on their own. 10 ninth heaven celestial kings stood up from their balled-up posture, each of them exuding frighteningly powerful auras. They had just been forging towards the height of the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, and though their progress had now been interrupted, and it was also possible that there would never be another chance for them to become a pseudo-heavenly venerate, the 10 of them were still peak-stage ninth heaven celestial kings. With their combined efforts, even a pseudo-heavenly venerate would probably shudder. However, the eyes of these 10 ninth heaven celestial kings were all completely black. The black and white of their eyes could not be differentiated at all, which was extremely eerie. They were walking corpses, Ling Han immediately thought. They had absorbed Hysteria's power, but it was also inevitable that they would become walking corpses without any consciousness. They would only obey commands. This was also why Desolate Moon was needed. He was not only needed as a middle person, he was also responsible for directing these pseudo-heavenly venerates to battle. Furthermore, why was Desolate Moon only a celestial king, and not a pseudo-heavenly venerate himself? It was probably for the same reason. Yingxiong laughed loudly. Boom! He unleashed his golden energy endlessly. Leave. I, Yingxiong, will stop them here. Not one of them will be able to take one step further. Ling Han took a deep breath, and said, I hope we will meet again one day. Humph, don't speak as if we are friends, Yingxiong retorted coldly. I only chose to let you break free since your state is better than mine. In truth, I would still be very pleased to cut off your head. Ling Han nodded. I will get revenge for you. He did not linger any longer. With so many ninth heaven celestial kings surrounding them, what time was there left for him to waste? Xiao. With a flash of his figure, Ling Han immediately raced towards the depths of this palace. Take him down. Take him down. Desolate Moon was flustered and exasperated. If all the celestial kings were awakened, he definitely would be able to stop Ling Han. But once the process to break through to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier was interrupted, there would never be a second chance. Scheming for hundreds of millions of years, only for just a few ninth heaven celestial kings to be sent out? Wasn't that a joke? Any second-tier heavenly venerate would be able to deal with them easily. Desolate Moon could only awaken a limited number of celestial kings. Otherwise, even he would not be able to bear the consequences. After all, he was presently only one of Hysteria's dogs. Ha, just see how I, Yingxiong, will kill all in my way. The present Yingxiong was even more heroic instead. He waved his divine spear. Boom! Golden light was also flashing on the divine spear, burning like flames. 10 great ninth heaven celestial kings rushed forwards, but they were all stopped by Yingxiong. As golden energy surged out, he was extremely mighty and strong. Ling Han sighed. This was Yingxiong's most dazzling battle. Even if he won, he would still die from overexhaustion. In fact, it was possible that he would suddenly die in the midst of battle. On the matter of principles, Yingxiong had stood firmly, and was worthy of his name as one of the big shots of the world's paramount martial academy. My respect goes to you. Ling Han dismissed his other thoughts. Pung. His body art unleashed, and his speed was further boosted. The time that Yingxiong had won through fighting to the death for Ling Han definitely could not be wasted. Pang, pang, pang. Behind Ling Han, golden light was clashing with black qi, accompanied by furious shouts from Desolate Moon. He raced off after Ling Han alone. It could not be helped. These ninth heaven celestial kings had been interrupted when they had been in the process of evolution, and were like infants. Though they could obey commands, their understanding of commands was not adequate yet. They were told to kill Ling Han and Yingxiong. They saw that Yingxiong was closer, so he became the target of their mad offensive. They ignored Ling Han completely. Hence, Desolate Moon could only set off in pursuit by himself. He had long since attained the peak stage of the ninth heaven, and was a supreme monarch star himself as well. His battle prowess was extremely terrifying, but in terms of pure speed, he might not be a match for Ling Han. Furthermore, he had started off later, and there was a long distance between himself and Ling Han still. Yet Ling Han did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. If Desolate Moon caught up to him, and he released another dozen ninth heaven celestial kings, then even if Ling Han burst out with the 5 elements lightning technique, he wouldn't necessarily be able to break out of their siege. He had to rush back to the Martial Academy, and report the information that he had found out here. Otherwise, what would Yingxiong's sacrifice have been for? This level was the highest level of the palace. There was no 34th level. When Ling Han arrived at the end of the palace, he saw a black door of light appear ahead of him, with black qi twirling around it. Was this the path to leave this place? Ling Han paused slightly, looking hesitant. Boom! A terrifying aura spread out towards him. Desolate Moon had already caught up to him. Ling Han gritted his teeth. Whether it was or was not, he had to get a move on. Xiao! With a leap, he entered into the doorway of light. Instantly, his figure was close to vanishing. Desolate Moon arrived. He, too, stopped, and showed a hint of hesitation in his expression. Though Lord Hysteria has opened a passageway, the exit's position has not yet been adjusted. Even if this brat can escape, it is still a question of where he would appear. Perhaps, by the time he returns to the Martial Academy, I will have already completed my mission here. Should I pursue or not? The evolution has begun, so there is actually no need for me to stay on guard here. Just in case, I had better pursue. He took a step, and entered the black doorway of light as well. Xiao! His figure vanished immediately as well. Boom! A powerful pulling sensation assailed Ling Han, bringing him great pain. This indeed was a spatial passageway that could allow him to leave the Celestial King graveyard, but that was designed for pseudo-heavenly venerates. For Ling Han to traverse this passage at present naturally caused him great suffering. Energy mercilessly sliced towards him. Even if he was channeling the indestructible heaven scroll, it was still useless. He would be wounded at the slightest movement, and if he did not channel it, his injuries would become even heavier. Even Ling Han could not continue enduring. With a flash, he entered into the celestial guest residence. Crack! The flow of energy swept past, and furious flames were immediately ignited on the surface of the celestial guest residence. Seals lit up, and then dimmed rapidly again. Thankfully, this was divine metal, after all, and could resist the energy flow. It wasn't clear how much time had passed. Pang! The celestial guest residence was shot out, and streaked through the air before landing in a grassy meadow. Ling Han's figure appeared. His eyes swept over the surroundings. This was a plain, covered by green meadows. I have left, Ling Han immediately thought. This was definitely not the Celestial King graveyard. The vibe here was completely different. Ling Han leaped up, and immediately raced off. Who knew when Desolate Moon would come out? He'd take a look to see where he was, and how far he was now from the Martial Academy. His speed now was shocking, and with long-lasting stamina, it was more suitable for long-distance travel, making him capable of powerful bursts of speed. This was practically perfect. No wonder heavenly venerates are so strong. That is because what they are using is their own power, which is unlike celestial kings, who need to undergo a process of drawing on the power of regulations, Ling Han murmured as he kept running. At this time, he did not dare to absorb any void particle energy. If his body exploded, who knew how many years he would need to recover? I will enter into seclusion after I return, and boost my body art to the pinnacle of the seventh heaven before I come out again. Mountains and rivers were continuously left behind as Ling Han ran past them. After half a day of running, he finally discovered a large city, and directly exuded a great aura as he descended. The strongest in this city was only a fifth heaven celestial king tier. When they saw the 7 ribbons of iridescent light wrapped around Ling Han, they hurriedly rushed forward and addressed him as senior very respectfully. What city is this? And how far is this city from the world's paramount martial academy? Ling Han asked. The reason why he had directly revealed his proof of identity as a 7th heaven celestial king was so that he could save some time. Chapter 2656, 2656 Pursuit and Attack. 2656 Pursuit and Attack. That 5th heaven celestial king faltered slightly. He had not thought that Ling Han would actually ask this kind of question. Have you gone dumb? He thought, but of course, he would not dare voice this out. He hurriedly answered obediently, this is Star Arrival City, and is really quite far away from the world's paramount martial academy. Get me a map. Ling Han waved him off. That 5th heaven celestial king hurriedly brought a map, and handed it over to Ling Han. Ling Han glanced at the map. This was indeed quite far. With the speed of a celestial king, he would still have to run for at least 80 to 100 years. He was faster than the typical celestial king, but 50 years was definitely still needed. He tossed the map back to the other. Pung! Exerting force, he burst through the air. Goodness, this lord's might is truly shocking. That 5th heaven celestial king couldn't help but lay a hand on his chest. He is clearly just at the 7th heaven, but why does he give me a feeling that is even more terrifying than a 9th heaven celestial king? He collapsed onto the ground. He had to drink some tea to soothe his nerves. However, before he had even finished a single cup of tea, Wang, another terrifying aura appeared. Then, a figure completely wrapped up inside a black cloak appeared. Both build and gender were indistinguishable. That 5th heaven celestial king steeled himself, and asked, Who are you, sir? The cloaked person naturally was Desolate Moon. He ignored the other party, and drew his right hand through the air. Instantly, the scene of Ling Han conversing with the 5th heaven celestial king appeared once more. Regulations of time, tracing back the roots of history. Because it had just happened, it could be traced. Otherwise, if too much time had passed, the past could not be touched. That 5th heaven celestial king couldn't help but wipe away the cold sweat on his forehead. This mysterious figure in front of him gave him an extremely frightening feeling. Desolate Moon withdrew his hand, and glanced at that 5th heaven celestial king, his eyes blazing with killing intent. He had been set up, and became hateful of everyone. Furthermore, while he still had intelligence after he was modified by hysteria, it was inevitable that his personality would be affected, causing him to become extremely bloodthirsty. Now that he had left the Celestial King graveyard, everyone here had become his prey. It won't take much longer, Desolate Moon murmured. Boom! Endless black light suddenly surged out of his body, spreading out towards the whole city. What are you? That 5th heaven celestial king hurriedly tried to stop him, but the moment he came in contact with the black light, he immediately turned puppet-like, no longer capable of movement. In the matter of a few breaths, every living creature in the city was captured by the black light and turned into stone or wood. The city that had just been extremely lively moments ago had instantly become a dead city. Ha 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 ha. Desolate Moon laughed loudly. Pung! He soared into the skies, and continued his pursuit of Ling Han. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. He absorbed all the black light back into his body, but all the living beings in the city also turned into dust at the same time. Lord Hysteria's plans definitely cannot be stopped because of you. Ling Han only knew that Desolate Moon would definitely pursue him, but he did not know that Desolate Moon would also create massive bloodshed in the process. Ling Han's stamina was abundant, and he did not stop at all, heading directly for the world's paramount martial academy. When one had reached the height that he had, who would stop him along the way? To say nothing of the fact that his battle prowess far surpassed his cultivation level, merely his status as a seventh heaven celestial king was enough to allow him to do anything he liked. But it should be known that Ling Han was also a person who had a halo that attracted trouble. He had not encountered any trouble throughout a few years on the journey, but on one particular day, he crashed headfirst into a battle. Ling Han was really innocent. He had been running too quickly, and to save himself time, he would definitely be forging ahead on a straight course. He had not thought that he would actually rush into a chaotic battle which involved quite a few parties. He did not consider stopping, but rather just forged forcefully ahead. In any case, with his tough physique, he could even take on the attack of a ninth heaven celestial king head-on after channeling the indestructible heaven scroll. Naturally, he would have no further reservations. He only needed to rush forwards in a single stroke. How dare you! How greedy! He had not thought that this charge would actually anger everyone, and they all attacked him. There were seventh heaven celestial kings and even eighth heaven celestial kings among these people. Otherwise, they would not have dared to so aggressively attack a seventh heaven celestial king. Ling Han ignored them completely, just forging onwards while he was being attacked. Yet it caused these people to attack him even more madly. Golden light flickered all over his body. Pang! He rushed out of the crowd while completely ignoring all attacks. Mist was wafting ahead of him, with a plume of purple-red clouds that were as dazzling as flames. So there was a celestial medicine here. Ling Han finally understood. These people were fighting over the celestial medicine, and the ownership of this celestial medicine had not yet been determined. They had just been fighting intensely, and had not expected that Ling Han would barge in and interfere, directly rushing into their midst. Don't even think about it. Everyone grabbed out at Ling Han. Ling Han laughed. Since he had seen it, there was no reason that he should miss out on it. This celestial king was indeed a celestial king tier great herb, and its age was shocking. It would give him considerable help as well. He moved, grabbing out at the celestial medicine. Pang, pang, pang. All the attacks flew towards him, and they were all absorbed by the indestructible heaven scroll. But when Ling Han laid down his palm, he gave a light exclamation of surprise because he actually pressed his hand down on nothing. The celestial medicine had grown legs and run? Ling Han withdrew his hand, yet saw that the celestial medicine was still where it had been. This was just a deception. The real celestial medicine was not here, or even on this plane at all. Its image was just a reflection, and it was not clear where it really was at all. If Ling Han was given enough time, he would definitely be able to find the whereabouts of this celestial medicine, but he was now in a rush to get back to the martial academy, so he naturally could only give up the matter with great reluctance. He shook his head, and was about to leave when he suddenly frowned. You have really been hard to find. Desolate Moon's voice rang out. Black chi that filled the skies descended like railings that surrounded Ling Han. Because this cage was too massive, those people from before had also been closed in. Who are you? Why have you imprisoned us? Don't bring trouble onto yourself. These people were all calling out, each of them furious. So noisy. Desolate Moon humphed coldly, and the black chi suddenly stormed. Shwa, shwa, shwa. These people were all blasted by the black chi, and were immediately turned stone-like. Then, they shattered with a resounding boom, turning into dust. He was a supreme monarch star at peak stage 9th heaven. Ling Han turned around, and faced Desolate Moon directly. Though he did not want to clash with Desolate Moon right now, who asked him to have encountered trouble, and it was just this momentary delay that allowed Desolate Moon to catch up to him. I still don't know your name yet, Desolate Moon stated calmly. To have me personally deal with you, you are now worthy to have your name remembered by me. Ling Han shook his head. I am not concerned about the praises of a lackey, but since you asked, then remember this. My name is Ling Han. It is unfortunate. You have lost your chance to take another step further. Otherwise, your future prospects would be boundless. Desolate Moon shook his head. By now, Ling Han was already trapped, and everything was over. Glib talk, but ultimately, it is only the delusional words of a maniac. Ling Han drew the divine demon sword. Xiao. His figure flashed, yet he had no wish to clash forcefully with Desolate Moon at all. Instead, he waved his sword in a slash at the prison that the Black Chi had formed. What was the most important now was to return to the martial academy and report the circumstances. Everything else could be set aside for later. How sharp was the divine demon sword? It had surpassed the level of a celestial tool, and even if a ninth heaven celestial king was directly hit, his fate would only be being sliced in half. Thus, as the sword descended, the Black Chi was immediately severed. Ling Han charged out, shooting out madly at an extraordinary speed. Desolate Moon was surprised. While he immediately set forth to pursue, he turned his eyes on the divine demon sword. A look of dawning realization flashed across his face. That was devouring metal. Chapter 2657, 2657 Arrival. 2657 Arrival. Ling Han ran, and Desolate Moon gave chase. Both used their respective methods. Desolate Moon continued striking aggressively against Ling Han with spiritual attacks and various weapons formed with Black Chi. Ling Han wasn't afraid. He used Indestructible Heaven Scroll to absorb oncoming attacks, and counterattacked with the Five Elements Lightning technique. Suddenly being struck by the Five Elements Lightning technique, Desolate Moon nearly suffered a big loss. However, he was after all a Supreme Monarch star at the peak of the ninth heaven, and his battle prowess surpassed Ling Han's by a huge extent. Moreover, he had also mastered the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll, this kind of heavenly venerate technique, and so diffused the attacks at the cost of a small loss. After this blow, Desolate Moon naturally became a lot more cautious, and no longer regarded Ling Han as a 7th heaven celestial king, but rather as a being with the same cultivation level as him. However, with Desolate Moon being so cautious, though Ling Han was also unable to injure the former again, it imperceptibly made the former a much smaller threat to Ling Han. Xiao, the 2 celestial kings constantly traversed through space at ridiculously high speed. Along the way, of course many people had sighted them, but who would dare to intervene and ask them what was going on? The fact that Desolate Moon was capable enough to be dispatched by Hysteria to oversee the entire situation of course meant that he wasn't as simple as just a Supreme Monarch star at the peak of the ninth heaven. When he saw that he couldn't catch up to Ling Han for a long time, his eyes flashed, and he drew out 3 fine needles. These needles were given to him by Hysteria. Of course, they weren't precious tools refined by Hysteria himself, but were obtained from the hands of the heavenly venerates who had died in the midst of the long period of war. This was a heavenly venerate tool. Of course, these 3 fine needles were severely damaged, far from having the power of the heavenly venerate, but they were still beyond the level of the ninth heaven, and were infinitely close in power to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Most importantly, the power of these 3 fine needles could be fully unleashed in Desolate Moon's hands. Go! Desolate Moon grunted softly, and with the complete channeling of his power, the 3 fine needles were completely awakened. However, there was no flicker of seals, only the surging of endless power. Heavenly venerates did not cultivate regulations. Zhu, the 3 fine needles were fired simultaneously, and pursued Ling Han at an indescribable speed. Ling Han couldn't help but feel a powerful sense of alarm. With a sweep of his divine sense, he discovered the 3 fine needles. However, upon discovering them, they were already less than 300 meters away from him, and were still rapidly approaching him. 270 meters, 240 meters, 210 meters, this speed far exceeded Ling Han's. He activated the regulations of space to teleport himself to another location, but those fine needles automatically changed direction as if they had self-awareness. If the Heavenly Venerate tool could be dodged so easily, then it would be too shabby, wouldn't it? Ling Han used the regulations of time again in an attempt to delay the course of the 3 fine needles, but it was ineffective, as if nothing would work. Heavenly Venerate tool. Ling Han thought to himself. Only the Heavenly Venerate tool would have such power. His only option was to take it head-on. Ling Han made a sharp turn, brandished the divine demon sword, and slashed at the 3 fine needles. Ding! Ding! With 2 crisp sounds, the divine demon sword slashed onto 2 fine needles one after another, slicing them in half with an invincible force, but the 3rd thin needle broke through the divine demon sword's resistance, and directly struck Ling Han's body. Ling Han was already channeling the indestructible Heaven Scroll, but this time, the indestructible Heaven Scroll had no effect. The fine needle ripped open his skin and entered his blood vessels. Desolate Moon couldn't help but sigh. With the passage of time, even the precious tool refined by the Heavenly Venerate was laid to waste. Otherwise, though the fine needles were made of neither divine metal nor devouring metal, they shouldn't be cut in just one slash. Still, 1 fine needle had entered Ling Han's body, and that was enough to allow the power of pseudo-heavenly venerable tier to be unleashed. Even someone at the peak of the 9th heaven celestial king would meet his end. Ling Han retracted his sword, turned around, and continued to run. He knew something was wrong, but could only keep running while thinking of a solution. It was hurting. He felt as if the blood in his body was burning, the pain was unbearable. This wasn't an illusion, could clearly see the heat rising from his skin, and moisture was depleting rapidly. This was a great deadly weapon, it was burning him alive, and turning him into a dried corpse. Ling Han humphed, and extracted a large volume of water element from heaven and earth using his left hand before inserting it into his body to ease the crisis within. He channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll again, trying to force the fine needle out of his body. But the fine needle moved in his body according to his blood flow, astonishingly as fast as before. It was impossible to capture it at all. It's futile, that's a weapon that the 1000 transformation Heavenly Venerate had personally refined in the past. Although he had just forged it casually, and had not used any precious materials, it is still not something that you, a puny 7th heaven celestial king, can fight against, Desolate Moon said from behind. Naturally, Ling Han ignored him. He had experienced countless dangers in his life, so how could he give up just because of a few words from his opponent? However, Desolate Moon was right about one thing, Ling Han really had no way to force the fine needle out of his body. Then, Ling Han's expression suddenly hardened, and slashed at his finger with his sword. Pa! Blood splashed as a finger was immediately chopped off, but the deadly boiling within his body also disappeared. As the thin needle just happened to circulate up to his finger, it was cut off along with his finger. It was a prompt and resolute decision, not because Ling Han didn't care about this hand, but because he cherished his life more. Ling Han didn't even bat an eyelid. Previously, his body had undergone repeated explosions, so what was the big deal with just one finger being cut off now? Desolate Moon was shocked. He didn't expect that Ling Han was not only ruthless to himself, but also had such amazing insight that he could eradicate a great danger at minimal cost. His eyes flashed with killing intent. If Ling Han was allowed to escape, he would surely become a peerless elite in the future, and be one of the main forces of resistance against hysteria. Ling Han could not be left alive. Desolate Moon went all out to give chase, wanting to get rid of this hidden danger. Ling Han was neither angry nor alarmed, his objective being extremely clear. Even if he had an opportunity to kill Desolate Moon, he would not do so, because the most important thing right now was to prevent those 9th heaven celestial kings in the ancient tomb from becoming pseudo-heavenly venerates. Chasing, fleeing, 10, 20, 30 years. Time flew past. Almost 50 years later, the great mountain where the world's paramount martial academy was located came into Ling Han's sight. As a former disciple of the martial academy, how could Desolate Moon not know that this was the world's paramount martial academy? He humphed angrily, but had to stop his pursuit, turned around, and left. If the heavenly venerates of the martial academy were drawn out, then Desolate Moon would definitely be killed instantly. Having sold himself to serve Hysteria, he would be killed on the spot even if he was the son of a 7th-tier heavenly venerate. Damn! Damn! Desolate Moon humphed. I can only activate the backup plan now. I absolutely must not let a mere pawn ruin the plans of Lord Hysteria. Ling Han quickened his pace, and then entered into the area under the jurisdiction of the world's paramount martial academy. There weren't any guards here. The 9 Deaths formation would keep all unqualified people out, so why bother guarding? He quickly passed through the great formation, and shouted towards the sky, his loud voice like rolling thunder. What the heck's with all that shouting? Many celestial kings rushed out immediately, and roared at Ling Han. They were all prodigies from countless realms, each of them with invincible aptitude. Ling Han pressed on without hesitation, and said loudly, "Is the Black Donkey Senior here?" A black shadow flashed, and then a black donkey suddenly appeared, with shock written all over its face. How did you get out here? Who let you out? Senior, something big has happened. Ling Han said with utmost seriousness. Chapter 2658, 2658 Something big has happened. 2658 Something big has happened. What's the big deal? The black donkey nonchalantly asked. Yo, little Han, how come you are back? The large black dog also ran out. When he saw Ling Han, he couldn't help but gaze at him in round-eyed wonder. This was absolutely unimaginable. A person who had entered the Celestial King graveyard could actually break out on his own? Let's find a secluded place to talk, Ling Han said. The black donkey stood up, and suddenly the man, dog, and donkey disappeared with a movement of the latter's hooves. Those prodigies who had broken out were all confused indeed. What was the problem with this person? Who is this person? I don't recognize him. His name is Ling Han, a young man suddenly spoke up, a smile on his face. Yingxiong. At that time, there had been no news since Ling Han battled Heavenborn. Most people said that he was already dead. Although Yingxiong did not believe that Ling Han would die so easily, the latter had not appeared for so many years. This caused Yingxiong to feel doubts as well. But just now, he finally saw Ling Han. Who is this Ling Han? Someone asked. Now that's a long story. Yingxiong laughed. Ling Han, the black donkey, and the large black dog appeared on top of a mountain. The black donkey asked impatiently, Brat, did the sky collapse, or has the ground submerged? Ling Han recounted what had happened in the ancient tomb, and the black donkey's face had a shocked expression. Oh my goodness, this is really a big deal. The black donkey was alarmed. I can't handle this matter. I will look for Zhou Heng immediately to let him handle this. Otherwise, even if 1 or 2 manage to break out, it will cause huge trouble. Moreover, originally the establishment of the Celestial King graveyard was in consideration of the various heavenly venerates. Now if all the Celestial Kings in there are to be killed, there will definitely be opposition coming from many heavenly venerates. It would be difficult to settle this matter satisfactorily. Damn, how could that bastard, Hysteria, pull off such a dirty trick? The black donkey jumped around, looking extremely irritated. Killing a group of 9th Heaven Celestial Kings wouldn't be difficult. The difficulty was that many 9th Heaven Celestial Kings came from powerful backgrounds. Furthermore, now was the time to stand united in the fight against Hysteria. If this event caused discord among the people, then it would affect the entire situation. Never mind, I will go deliver the news first. The black donkey tore a rip into space, and immediately left. Ling Han and the large black dog looked at each other. Although they hadn't seen each other for almost 100 million years, both hadn't changed at all. Damned dog, how is the divine metal coming along? Ling Han asked. They still had another task, which was to suppress Heavenborn and substitute his soul with that of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable. However, the physique of Heavenborn was comparable to divine metal. In order to be able to strike him, the divine demon's sword had to be upgraded to the level of a Heavenly Venerate tool before it could be a threat to Heavenborn. Che, do you think the divine metal can just be found anywhere? The large black dog said irritably, but still took out 7 pieces of divine metal. Ling Han was astounded. Where did you swindle all that from? Having gotten 7 pieces of divine metal in just 100 million years, even if it was done in the flaming frost realm, wasn't an easy feat. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Can't you talk properly? The large black dog waved a paw. Quickly, let's see if you can upgrade the divine demon's sword with these. Ling Han nodded. He took out the divine demon's sword, and it began to devour the divine metal. Divine metal was tough and durable. Any ninth heaven celestial king could forge and cut it, but it could never be destroyed. However, when faced with devouring metal, the divine metal would become extremely fragile, with all its essence being quickly extracted and turning to dust. Ling Han waved the divine demon's sword, and carefully examined it before saying, "It's still lacking. I gather it still needs about 3, 5 or 10 pieces of divine metal." Fuck. The large black dog bared his teeth. Why do you still need so much? Do you want me to die? Ling Han just smiled and stared intently at the large black dog. All right. I'll just go and get some more, okay? The large black dog turned and left. Actually, he was even more looking forward to the resurrection of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable than Ling Han himself. After all, Ling Han had never met the karmic life Heavenly Venerable, but the large black dog had been cultivating by the side of the karmic life Heavenly Venerable, and their relationship ran extremely deep. Ling Han returned to his quarters. After so many years, he had accumulated countless cultivation resources. The Empress and Bewitching Maiden Row also came out of Celestial Guest Residence, and handed over all their cultivation resources to Ling Han for him to deal with them accordingly. Ling Han planned to concoct alchemical pills. Relying solely on the amount supplied by the Martial Academy, the cultivation resources which he could obtain were still limited. After all, he wanted to upgrade the indestructible Celestial King physique, which required an inordinate amount of resources. If he were to depend on the supply from the Martial Academy, then it might take him 1 epoch before he could attain this goal. He was recuperating from his injuries while cultivating and concocting the pills at the same time. As for the events of Ancient Tomb, he no longer needed to worry about it. If even Zhou Heng couldn't handle this matter, then what could Ling Han, a 7th heaven celestial king, do about it? Several years later, his severed finger regenerated without the slightest lingering after-effect. And a few years later, there was news that the Celestial King graveyard had been destroyed, and only a few people managed to come out alive. This was indeed very shocking. It attracted the attention of countless people, and infuriated many major forces. It was actually due to the ascending dragon pill that many celestial kings, such as the Azure Ghost Celestial King, had been sent into the Celestial King graveyard. However, now that these people had died here, naturally there wouldn't be any more ascending dragon pills. While the major forces were infuriated by this news, they were also investigating the truth of the matter. When Ling Han got to know about it, he was sure that certain forces would put the blame on him, as it was his report which led to the destruction of the Celestial King graveyard. Of course, this had nothing to do with Ling Han. If it weren't for him bringing back news on the emergence of so many pseudo-heavenly venerates, there would be no telling of the extent of damage that would have resulted. This was actually a great merit. However, those major forces would not think like this, for they only knew that their own interests had been jeopardized, and the direct cause of it was Ling Han. If they want to blame me, so be it. If I attain great accomplishment in my cultivation level, whom shall I fear? Whoever dares to come and cause trouble, I'll kill them immediately. They dared to do such a deranged thing, each of them deserved to be killed. Ling Han swiftly put this matter aside, and concentrated on his cultivation and concocting alchemical pills. It took him 1,000 years to absorb a single void particle, which he subsequently used to refine his body in order to achieve advancement in his body art, while his physical body had to undergo a complete destruction first. This way of improving one's strength was extremely arduous but incomparably effective. Under such rigorous tempering, he actually succeeded in the complete cultivation of the 7th level of indestructible celestial king physique. Ling Han made persistent efforts, and his strength steadily improved. On the other hand, he also concocted plenty of alchemical pills, and planned to find an opportunity to trade them for some natural treasures. 30,000 years later, he came out of seclusion. As soon as he came out, the Rain Emperor, Yan Xianlu, and Yi came over one after another, and talked to him about the old times. Thinking back, they had not seen each other for almost 100 million years. The Rain Emperor's cultivation speed was still as fast as before, with him having already reached the height of the 5th heaven, while Yan Xianlu and Yi were slightly worse off, having only reached the level of 3rd heaven. This couldn't be compared to Ling Han, but no matter which realm he was placed in, his speed was considered to be amazing. Ling Han, my master has a message for you, so quickly come out on your knees and listen to it. A voice suddenly rang out. Who is so arrogant? Yan Xianlu immediately stood up. Yi's eyes flashed, and he said, that seems to be Heavenborn's lackey, Zhu Hongxian. Heavenborn. Ling Han's and the Rain Emperor's eyes lit up, revealing a raging fighting spirit. I'm going to send him away. Yi stood up as well and walked towards the door. Heavenborn just sent a mere subordinate, so they couldn't let Ling Han face him, or wouldn't that be demeaning him? You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.